We're just waiting for the live stream that actually started. Okay.
It's ready.
Yeah.
Good evening. I would like to welcome you all to ACNE's first remote council meeting. We have a very full agenda, so I would like to kindly request that we keep to time. You should have all received a copy of the remote meeting protocols, so please be mindful of them. A short comfort break has been included in the agenda after agenda item 7. Please, may we hold a minute silence in memory of all those we have lost through the COVID-19 virus. Thank you. Thank you. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. I have received apologies for absence from Councillor Desmond, Councillor Palace, and Councillor Woodley. I have received apologies for lateness from no one. Are there any other apologies for absence or lateness?
Chair, I am here.
Oh, okay. Yes, I've just been told that Councillor Adejare she's running late.
Cam, I'm also here, Councillor Desmond.
Oh, Councillor Desmond is here. Okay, good.
I certainly am, yes.
Are there any other apologies for absence or lateness?
Mr. Speaker, how are we going to know who was here, who wasn't here, if there's no ticking the box? I would suggest we go through all the names, and that's how we know they're here.
Yeah, we have listed names. There's a name on the screen. We have a screen here, so we know. Councillor Stamberger, we got a screen in front of us here, we know. Yeah, we can see the names. Is that okay?
I hope it's okay. I mean, I just don't want.
I'm just telling you that we have the names, so it's okay.
I don't rely too much on technology, so
we have to trust technology. That's what we have now. We have to trust technology. That's what we have. Thank you. So we have to move on now. Agenda item 2, Speaker's announcement. Here are a few of my highlights of the last few lockdowns month. I made a video for a virtual VE Day celebration, a video for in support of ACNE Givens Coronavirus Response Fund. Also, I made a video with the mayor for a virtual Eid celebration. I attended a virtual solidarity vigil for George Floyd, a virtual ACNE musical memorial concert for COVID-19 victims, a virtual Shribinista Memorial 2020 celebration. I marked virtually, along with the mayor and Colonel Morris, the Armed Forces Day. And I attended virtually the Parkwood School Anniversary Celebration Assembly and the Lubavitch Mad Boys and Girls Schools Assembly. Please watch out for any announcement of future engagements over the next few months. Agenda item 3, Declaration of interest. Are there any declaration of interest relating to any item on the agenda? If so, could members please declare it now, indicating which item it relates to and the nature of the interest? Councillor Lynch, I understand you have a declaration of interest. Please, can you declare now?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My declaration of interest is in agenda item 6, and that I'm employed by the NHS, and I'm also a shared ownership leaseholder with the London Borough of Hackney.
Councillor Stubbs, I understand that you have an interest to declare.
Thank you. Just to tell people that the one of the questions from the members of the public is my wife, Rita Krishna. I've sought legal advice and I don't need to leave the meeting room. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other declaration? Thank you. Agenda item 4, minutes of the meeting held 26 February 2020. Can we agree the minutes of the previous meeting of council held on Wednesday, 26 February 2020? If you have matters of accuracy, please turn your camera on. If you have matter of accuracy, please turn your camera on. Right. So, can we agree the minutes, please?
Yeah.
Agreed.
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 Thank you.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you. Agenda item 5, questions from members of the public. I would like to welcome the members of the public present this evening. 30 minutes have been allocated for questions from members of the public that have been submitted with notice and highlighted in the agenda in accordance with the council's constitution. We have received 7 questions, which will be taken in the order in which they were received. We will endeavor to take as many of your questions as possible within the 30 minutes time frame. However, those which we are unable to take will receive a written response from the relevant cabinet member, which will also be published. I will call you individually by name and invite you to ask your question, following which the relevant cabinet member will respond. You will then have the opportunity to ask a supplementary question. Your supplementary question must arise directly out of the original question or the reply, and must not be a speech or a statement. Reina Tegmaya, are you present? Reina Tegmaya, are you present?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much.
Good evening. Please ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for Councillor John Burke. Dear Mr. Burke, what are the measures of success the Council will use to assess successful implementation and monitoring of the COVID-19 emergency road transformation measures? And how do these measures contribute to the Council's aim to deliver net zero emissions by 2040 as declared by the Council, and to support Hackney's vulnerable and BME residents? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Buck, please, will you reply? You have up to and not exceeding 5 minutes.
Chair, the question
Yes.
I've just been asked is not the question on the order paper.
I'm sorry, that is a question as well as being recorded on the agenda as question number 1. Bear with me 1 minute. I can see it as well on the screen.
Yeah, it's on the screen. I know. Just want to check. Mr. Tegmaya, the question is a little bit slightly different from what's on the agenda. Do you want to read according to the agenda so that Councillor Borg can reply to that?
I'm very sorry, I repeat. So what are the measures of success the Council is using to annually examine whether plans are successfully implemented and monitored? That is, they are progressing as planned, and whether and how these measures contribute to the Council's aim to deliver net zero emissions across Council functions by 2040. I'm very sorry there was a mixing of those questions. So the last question is actually on the screen.
It's all right. It's all right.
Yes,
all right.
sorry.
Councillor Borg, could you please reply? You have up to and not exceeding 5 minutes to reply. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Tegmaya. As you'll be aware, just over a year ago, the Labour members of Hackney Council overwhelmingly, unanimously, in fact, voted to declare a climate emergency in this borough, and in doing so, stated explicitly that we would deliver decarbonisation targets of 45% decarbonisation against 2010 levels by 2030 and net zero emissions by 2040. And in that very detailed motion, which was moved by Councillor Billington, we also stated clearly the kind of measures that we would be implementing and the scope of our functions that we would focus on to decarbonise the council. I'm happy to report to you that the annual update promised in that climate emergency motion has been delivered for the first time this evening. I will talk to that later in detail. Given the limited time, I will not go into the many and extensive measures that we've undertaken over the last 12 months. It's been a remarkable period for decarbonisation in the council, other than to offer some of the headlines, which are, of course, 100% renewable electricity on £6.5 million worth of electricity supply from the 1st of April 2020. Numerous active travel measures, the approval, albeit within the context of coronavirus, of the first 2 low traffic neighbourhoods for 46 years, and the approval to proceed with fortnightly residual waste collections at street properties, which will eliminate circa 5,000 tonnes of incinerated waste every year in the borough. We had a choice last year, Mr. Tegmaya, which was to spend our time writing about how we were going to decarbonise the borough of Hackney over the next 12 months, or actually roll our sleeves up and demonstrate to the public that change was not only necessary, but that rapid and deep decarbonisation was possible. And I believe in the measures that I'll lay out later this evening that we've manifestly demonstrated that that is possible. Notwithstanding, we also agree as an administration that we need to be able to demonstrate progress to the public on an annual basis in our update. And while we've attempted to do that this evening, the real work to demonstrate baselines and pathways of decarbonisation in a kind of graphical sense will be undertaken in future years, as we are only in the final stages of completing the Hackney Energy Strategy.
Councillor Borg, you've got a minute left.
Thank you, Speaker. As we are in the final stages of delivering our promised Hackney Energy Strategy, which will provide the basis upon which we will tell the story of decarbonisation by the council in this borough towards our stretching targets over the next 10 and 20 years.
Thank you, Councillor Bob. Mr. Tegmaier, do you have a supplementary question?
In view of the numerous questions to be raised tonight and the limited time, and as well as the statements being announced by Councillor Burke to be made later in the evening, I would refrain from any supplementary question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tegmaier. Thank you for your attendance. Next question. Ms. Rita Krishna, are you present?
I am present, Mr. Speaker.
Good evening. Please ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Shoreditch Park Secondary Academy is on a temporary site adjacent to Haggerston Park. In September 2020, there will be 541 pupils on our constrained site. We need a formal arrangement for access to the multi-use games area on Haggerston Park, which is owned by Hackney Parks. Can the council help to broker a formal arrangement?
Thank you. Mayor Glanville, please, will you reply? You have up to and not exceeding 5 minutes. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, if I may, I'll respond to the question.
Oh, okay then.
As a good deputy normally does, always ready to step in. So I'll respond on behalf of the mayor and myself on this. I'll turn my camera off because I'm not quite sure how well you can hear me, Mr. Speaker. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Rita, for joining us here this evening for Full Council. Rita, as you are aware that from 2008, the existing multi-use games area adjacent to Haggerston Park is leased from the council to Bridge Academy. And as we have discussed on several occasions and also with officers on several occasions, as Bridge Academy have the lease, it is up to them to decide and arrange any agreements for the multi-use games area. The council cannot instruct academy chains to work together with other schools, but we can and will continue to facilitate discussions, and this has been ongoing for some while. With that being said, officers have regularly tried to impress upon Bridge Academy for the limited period that the school is on the temporary site is in use. Yes.
I don't know whether everyone else can hear you, but I think you were cutting in and out. I missed part of your answer.
Okay. Can you hear me a bit better now?
Yes, thanks. It was really just the bit after facilitate.
I'll start again.
No need to start again. No need to start again. Just from facilitate.
But facilitate. So, and officers will continue to facilitate, have they've done previously. We've tried to press upon the importance of Bridge Academy, our desire to find an agreement for both schools over the time while Acola is on the temporary site. With that being said, my understanding that in the beginning when London Academy Shoreditch Park went onto the temporary site, it was my understanding that the CEO of City of London Academies Trust said that they would liaise with Bridge Academy and they would reach a formal agreement. I also understand that both schools had been in discussions and an offer was made by Bridge, and my understanding that City Academy did not accept that offer because they felt that it didn't go far enough. I think the fact that I understand that this issue is rising again because yes, there will be more children on the temporary site in September, which impresses upon us even more the importance of why we need a new school building at the Britannia site. I think there's no question of that. Going forward, officers are again happy to facilitate a meeting between the two schools to try and find an arrangement. I know that some offers of other places, I think across the school, for example, was an option officers had suggested, but for obvious reasons, the school didn't feel that going across the road was suitable. So going forward, officers are happy to negotiate or facilitate a meeting between the new schools and to explore other arrangements.
Deputy Mayor Bramble, you've got a minute left.
I'm happy to join any meetings with the heads to help them to negotiate and come to an agreement. I would suggest,
Rita, possibly you going back to the head teacher to see if the offer that Bridge Academy first made to the school is still on offer, and that way there will be an immediate solution in September, and we could think about how we can facilitate and encourage an offer that works for both schools in the interim. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bramble. Ms. Krishna, do you have a supplementary question?
I'm afraid I do, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for your reply, Antoinette. I think my first meeting with you and the Mayor to raise the issue of the absence of outdoor space was on the 17th of July 2017, and there was a subsequent email that I sent on the 28th of June 2018. You know, and so as you know, it is ongoing. It isn't, although my question relates specifically to the MUGA, and I have cleared the question both with the Chair of Governors and with the Principal, so I wouldn't be asking the question if the situation had been resolved. So my further question, and I'm asking it actually because it's no skin off my nose, it's basically about the 541 children who are not getting sufficient access to PE. And if they are being bused to elsewhere, they are losing out on curriculum time because of the time that it takes to get to wherever it is they're able to do the exercise. So I guess my broader question is,
Your minute is over for your supplementary question, please. Can we move on to this question?
what arrangements will be made for access to the parks for physical activity for children at Hackney schools?
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Bramble, could you please reply? You've got 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Rita, for your additional question. As I said before in my first response, officers are working and looking at other arrangements to work with the school around that. They are willing to facilitate and hopefully get the heads to be able to come to an agreement themselves. In terms of the park, as you know, many schools do use the park for different activities, but I would again say to you that I do understand that the schools came to an agreement and an offer was made by Bridge to City, and would encourage you and the school to take that offer, and we're happy to, if you want officers or myself to facilitate continued meetings around this, to have something that is amicable for both schools, we're happy to do that. But as you know, the lease is with Bridge Academy, which is legally binding, that lease. So therefore, this is within the gift of Bridge Academy to negotiate that. But I would urge you for September to take the offer that was already offered to the school. So then that is resolved and we can move forward from there. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bramble. Ms. Krishna, thank you for your attendance. Ms. Zoe Gabit, are you present?
Yeah.
Good evening.
I'm present.
Ms. Gabit, please, can you ask your question?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So my question's for Councillor Nicholson. Thank you for addressing my question again. And this is that the recent High Court ruling has highlighted the council's failings in planning practice. What is the council doing to ensure that councillors abide by planning code and ensure objections are heard?
Thank you. May I just remind the members and the cabinet members, when you are answering your question, could you please switch on your camera before you start answering your question? Thank you. Councillor Nicholson, please, will you reply? You have up to and not exceeding 5 minutes for your response.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Zoe, for your question. The judgment you refer to actually found that the council's planning practices were far from failing. You refer to a recent case where 4 grounds were taken to judicial review. 3 of those 4 grounds were rejected as they held no credibility and had no substance. The planning code of practice for members on the planning subcommittee was found lawful. It was found that the code of practice, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, it follows that councillors using the code did not materially prejudice either the objectors or the applicant with any unfairness. The so-called failing that you refer to, Zoe, actually involves the lack of public disclosure of technical documents known as viability assessments. The judge chose to overturn national case law and demand these be made public from now on, and demanded that councillors who are members of the planning subcommittee be permitted to have first-hand sight of all written representations made by both applicants and objectors alike. I would also like to point out, Mr. Speaker, that since April the 1st, over 1,800 objections to planning applications have been received by the planning authority, each one logged and considered in a professional and considered way. Far from closing down access to objectors, this council's planning service is going above and beyond the legal requirements to ensure there is an open dialogue in our borough about new development. Far from failing, Mr. Speaker, this council is one of the most respected, democratic and accessible planning committees in our capital city. It provides the space and time for objectors and applicants alike in a fair and transparent manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. I'm really impressed with you. Thank you. Ms. Garbett, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you for highlighting those issues that you've just spoken through, Councillor Nicholson. I just wanted to ask if you anticipate Hackney Council losing any more court cases in the near future on these issues.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson, could you please reply? Thank you.
Zoe, I am not in a position to be able to predetermine what an independent judiciary may or may not determine at a future hearing on a future case. So I'm afraid, much as I'd love to be able to respond to you on this matter, I'm afraid it falls well beyond my pay grade to be able to predetermine what a judge may or may not say about any future action that is laid before him or her. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Thank you, Ms. Garbett, for your attendance. John Cooper, are you present? John Kuiper.
Present indeed. Can you hear me?
Yes, good evening. Please ask your question.
Good evening, yes, good evening to you. My question is addressed to Councillor and a member of the Cabinet, John Burke. As an environmentalist and long-standing resident of Hackney, I welcome London and the Council's declaration of climate emergency, which was passed in June last year. The progress made to date to make Hackney carbon-free by 2040. My question is, the Climate Emergency Declaration commits to an annual citizens' assembly comprising representatives of local residents to allow for effective scrutiny of the Council's progress. Could Councillor Burke give details by whom, when, and how the selection of these representatives is determined, and also what their scrutineering powers are? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Burke, please, will you reply? You have up to and not exceeding 5 minutes to reply. Thank you. And don't forget to switch on your camera. Right. We're having some issues here. It seems that Councillor Burke has left the meeting. So
I'm in the meeting.
Oh, are you still here? Oh, yes. Good to see you.
I'm still here.
Yeah, could you please reply to Mr. Kuiper's question?
Should be visible.
You have up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kuiper. Mr. Speaker, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kuiper. As part of the annual update on progress with our decarbonisation commitments, which I will speak at length later this evening, we've outlined a framework for how we propose to engage and communicate with stakeholders in line with the commitment that we made at last year's June full council and the declaration of the climate emergency motion to conduct a citizens' assembly on an annual basis. And this includes a wide variety of measures that go beyond the Citizens' Assembly process for the purposes of engagement with the public. We consider that deliberative processes that include Citizens' Assembly would appear to be the most applicable to the objective of exploring solutions to the challenges posed by global warming, advising Council progress on its own commitments. Further work is, however, required to develop the public scrutiny process fully to meet this climate emergency commitment prior to the next annual update on our decarbonisation commitments in 2021. In particular, identifying the detailed performance targets to support public scrutiny and track progress meaningfully. Notwithstanding, there are a number of strategies and plans that relate to our commitments, which will be consulted on publicly in the near term, some of which are key to detailing our decarbonisation pathway and confirming annual performance targets developed using robust research and independent challenge. These will provide significant opportunities for stakeholders to comment and influence our future actions which impact upon the climate emergency. And they include, amongst others, the Green Infrastructure Strategy, the Parks and Green Spaces Strategy, the Air Quality Action Plan, Sustainable Design in the Built Environment, SPD, Local Nature Recovery Plan, and scrutiny work related to the just transition. Further, there will be additional opportunities for the public to engage with the Council's work in this area at this year's mid-November Sustainability Day on the proviso that further lockdown measures are not necessary in the winter. Thank you, Mr. Kuiper.
Thank you, Councillor Bog. Mr. Kuiper, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Burke. You haven't exactly answered my questions there, but I'll ask my supplement. We can perhaps get back to it after the meeting. But I'll ask my supplementary question. Can Councillor Burke confirm that representatives from organisations such as Sustainable Hackney, Build Back Better, and Hackney TUC will be invited?
Thank you. Councillor Bog, could you please reply?
Thank you.
2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Kuiper. I'm very keen to ensure that key stakeholders in the borough who have had an interest in issues of sustainability play a role in scrutinising the Council's work in this area. However, I'm equally keen to ensure that our future work on engagement with the public does not merely include the usual suspects and extends as broadly as we possibly can. I think it would be fair to say that the environmental community, however benign its intentions, is not necessarily representative ethnically, politically, socially or economically of the London Borough of Hackney. And we believe as an administration that to ensure that we bring the public with us, we need the broadest possible participation from a wide range of people who hitherto have not been engaged in the environmental movement. So clearly there'll be engagement with key stakeholders, but there'll be even more engagement with the key stakeholders of all, who are our residents.
Thank you, Councillor Bog. Thank you, Mr. Kuiper, for your attendance. Moving on. Yes, Mr. Alex Armitage, are you present?
Yeah, I'm present.
Good evening. Please ask your question.
Thanks. And this is a question to the Mayor, Phil Glanville. There's minimal analysis of the upfront carbon emissions associated with construction of buildings in Hackney. There's also no analysis that I could find of embedded carbon emissions that could be saved if existing buildings were refurbished instead of demolished and commit to conducting these analyses to shape planning policy in light of the climate emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Armitage. Mayor Glanville, please will you reply? You have up to and not exceeding 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Dr. Armitage, for your question. Clearly this evening, there's a great deal of interest in our climate emergency work, and I reiterate our strong commitment to addressing the climate emergency across all of our functions. This means reducing carbon emissions, improving our local resilience, and ensuring that all our developments can adapt to climate change. Our approach in alignment with our climate emergency declaration is being developed to address carbon emission reductions at several fronts. We've commissioned technical report to support our commitment to achieve net carbon zero by 2040. As you know, that is 10 years before the UK target. In particular, in January 2020, we commissioned an energy strategy to inform the delivery of the Council's commitments on energy, as well as provide a roadmap. Phase 1 included scoping, defining which emission sources are in scope for our carbon neutral target, as well as setting out which scoping decisions are required now, preferable now, or can and should be taken at a later stage. We're absolutely fully aware that the built environment represents more than 40% of the UK's carbon emissions. Our new local plan, subject to approval this evening, will require that all new buildings need to be zero carbon. We're committed to reducing embedded carbon associated with the building environment, as set out in the emerging London Plan policies associated with the whole life cycle emissions that addresses embodied carbon. And that is at the B seen stage of energy hierarchy to reduce the performance gap in design and in the in-use phase, as well as circular economy to reduce waste in construction and demolition phases, always promoting refurbishing, reusing and adapting future spaces for use. Initiatives to achieve the target reductions are expected to include reducing embodied carbon from our own new building developments, and based on current modelling and scope, by 2040 embodied emissions would be the only remaining significant emissions for Council. We believe that including embodied carbon is a bold step that signals our ambition to tackle significant emissions from consumption and in particular development. This aligns with life cycle assessment and the circular economy sections of the new draft London Plan. Design that will also focus on the embodied energy of new builds against today's levels within industry net zero guidance is key to limiting emissions in this category. There would, however, still need to be some offsetting residual emissions. As part of the development management process, developers of major schemes are required to submit energy statements in support of an application. There are proposals to expand on this assessment process for major applications in the future to ensure that consideration of whole life cycle and circular economy considerations are taken into account. Subject to the introduction, such assessments will need to make balanced judgments upon the benefit to environmental sustainability against other social and economic gains. For example, demolition of existing buildings could secure optimal use for the development of that site for increases in affordable housing provision. Some other studies and projects to reduce carbon include decentralised energy networks in the borough and making sure that they can make the energy switch that we'll need, and the work to reduce carbon emissions on existing buildings, as well as tackling fuel poverty. And that is all part of the wider work that Councillor Burke will be going into later. What I will say though, Mr. Speaker, is what we will not do is pause our ambition to deliver high quality, more sustainable, new and generally affordable homes. We made promises at the ballot box in 2006, 2010, 2014, 2016 and 2018. And while that might not mean anything to opposition parties, it is vital for us that we make good on those commitments we made to Hackney residents. That means building those 800 new homes for council social rent, and also meeting those commitments we made to residents at Woodbury Down, Colville and Marion Court. But I'm sure all of you will notice that we have turned a page on the demolition and rebuilding based regeneration. And we're looking to refurbish and retrofit sensitive infill when it comes to our developments going forward. And just lastly, I know that we have a supplementary planning guidance around sustainability, design and construction, and I firmly hope that alongside the local plan this evening that we can refresh that guidance in line with our climate emergency commitments and ensure that we have the very best practice in London on these issues. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. Mr. Armitage, do you have a supplementary question? You have to unmute yourself. You have to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I do have a supplementary question. Thank you. Mayor Glanville, it's great to hear such a strong statement of intent around your ambitions to reduce carbon emissions related to construction, and of course, in all of the other aspects of the council's activities. what I wanted to ask, because I've been through some of the energy statements for many of the large projects in Hackney, and it's very difficult to actually find the data on the amount of carbon emissions associated with the construction of these developments. Will the council commit to publishing these data, and furthermore, will the council commit to publishing an annual audit of all the carbon emissions that are produced by the council in light of all its activities? I expect that Councillor Burke will be enlightening us on this further, but I would like to hear that commitment from you.
Thank you.
An annual carbon audit.
Thank you. Mayor Glanville, could you please reply?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Dr. Armitage. On the second point that you made about the annual emissions data, that is something that we are committed to. I think it's explored in further detail in the report later, and I'm sure Councillor Burke will come back to what that will look like and how we improve that technical analysis and create a baseline for what we're doing now and into the future on an annual basis. And obviously taking that before the Citizens' Assembly, as well as the other forms of engagement that Councillor Burke talked about, is an absolute commitment of mine and the administration's. In terms of the best practice around applications and development, as I think I set out, there are more stringent targets in our new local plan, and we want to ensure that we make maximum use of that as a planning authority, but also we are completely cognizant that many of our developments and the architecture that underpins them came from a different era before we declared that climate emergency. So there's an intensive piece of work that we are already underway between myself, Deputy Mayor Renison and Councillor Burke to refresh that work, look at all of those opportunities to improve energy efficiency. I think it is really important we also think about the end user in terms of fuel poverty and energy efficiency, as well as what the developer can deliver at the development phase, as I said in the first part of my answer. And the other aspect is looking at how we use new materials like cross-laminated timber to make developments not just carbon neutral, but embed carbon in them when we build them. And we've got examples both at Colville, at Woodbury Down, and the new terraced news houses scheme in Dorbley Fields, Dorbley Road will again be built with cross-laminated timber, which is one of the housing supply programme projects. So we do want to look at the whole nature of our development and ensuring we meet the objectives that I think you're highlighting this evening. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. Thank you, Mr. Armitage, for your attendance. We have now come to the end of the 30 minutes allocated time slot. I would like to thank the members of the public who have submitted questions and attended this evening meetings. Those questions which did not receive a response due to insufficient time will receive a written response which will also be published. As previously advised, can you please log out of the meeting? You are, however, welcome to watch the remainder of the meeting online as advertised on the Council's website and on the agenda pack for this meeting. Agenda item 6. Questions from members of the Council. The time allocated for this item is 30 minutes, and I will be strictly adhering to this. Can everyone please be mindful of the time frame? Cabinet members who will be responding, please note you have up to and not exceeding 5 minutes. Please, can I ask that you be as focused and sensitive as possible. After 30 minutes, any questions not answered will receive a written response. May I remind members that any supplementary questions must arise directly out of the original question or the reply and must not be a speech or a statement. The question will be presented on the screen, so you do not need to read them out. Councillor Garcia, please ask your question. Thank you. Councillor William, will you please respond?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As set out
use this as an opportunity to express my gratitude to staff for continuing to deliver direct services to residents throughout the pandemic, including teams across waste, parks, housing needs, repairs, call centre, social workers, as well as those who volunteered for redeployment in the food hub. The council worked hard from the very start of the pandemic to make sure that staff were able to do their work safely. We implemented specific risk assessment for work environments, reduced non-urgent services where needed during the first phase of the pandemic, made changes to working practices, enabled all staff of our office-based teams to work from home. We also developed a COVID-19 vulnerability assessment tool to help identify where staff might be at higher risk to COVID-19, for example, because of underlying and pre-existing health conditions. And this will support managers and staff to identify measures that they need to take to reduce risk. The Council Corporate Health and Safety team are supporting managers as they adapt the delivery of services that have to be done face-to-face, such as registering new births. Planning carefully for the phased reopening of our office spaces with a reduced number of workstations to enable social distancing. New cleaning arrangements are in place, as well as a new one-way system. Testing new arrangements with teams from different services to use their feedback to develop our approach. Supporting staff who are working from home in terms of their physical well-being and display screen equipment, and also for their mental health and emotional health. We will also be making loan equipment available to staff who are working from home. Although there are some plans to open office spaces in the Hackney Service Centre over the next couple of months, office-based staff are expected to continue to work from home for a large portion of their working week, while social distancing measures are in place. On workforce progression, the council continues to be committed to improving diversity at senior levels. Diversity of experience and different perspectives can enrich innovation and lead to better decisions and services by people who understand our communities. You'll recall from last year's gender pay gap report that we do not have gender balance at chief officer level. You'll also remember from the ethnicity pay gap report that much work needs to be done to improve diversity at senior levels also. In 2018, we launched a programme to promote a more inclusive and diverse workforce across the organisation. We're taking a dual approach, promoting demographic diversity and an inclusive leadership culture, as these two objectives support each other. We have developed and adapted a new set of features of inclusive leadership and have recruited and trained 35 inclusive leadership champions who have now trained 100 out of 120 of our top 3 tiers. They come from almost every division, reflecting Hackney's diversity and key equalities group, and we're working with them on ways to embed this leadership culture further in their divisions. Over the last year, we've also gathered insights to help identify solutions through focus groups between staff and senior leaders, surveys and workshops to design solutions. This rich insight has informed many actions across the council, including improving the data on workforce profile and developing a dashboard of diversity at senior level, identifying ways to develop more inclusive employment practices at every stage of the recruitment process. I don't have time to give all the examples.
Councillor Williams, you've got a minute left.
I don't have time to give all of the examples, but I will more than happy to send details to members in writing. And we are also, of course, supporting staff-led groups and conversations. We will build on this work, developing divisional plans and rolling out specific anti-racism training and online equality duty training for members. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Garcia, do you have a supplementary question?
That's great. Thank you, Councillor Williams. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No questions.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. Councillor Snell, please ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As set out.
Sorry, Councillor Nicholson, will you please respond? You have up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. And thank you, Councillor Snell, for your question. The Council is in the process of developing a Shop Safe, Shop Local campaign to support our local businesses and promote the safe reopening of our borough's high streets and town centres, and encouraging us all as individuals and as residents to support our local businesses. I'm sure, Councillor Snell, that you would agree that as we reopen our borough, what must be at the front of our mind is public health and public well-being. As where we have to now, the Council has been supporting our local business community to the tune of something in the order of £100 million over the course of the lockdown period, passporting money through to local businesses in the forms of grants and rebates, but also where the Council has been the commercial landlord. And as a commercial landlord, both for businesses, but also for voluntary and community sector organisations, and not forgetting the community sector at all, then it has brought forward a substantive rent support and rent deferral and indeed write-off initiative on a one-to-one basis, building that open book accounting and that open book relationship with our local businesses. The other kind of element of activity that's been going on, Mr. Speaker, has been, and I'm sure many colleagues have perhaps noticed as they walk down high streets in recent days and have observed in shop windows up and down the borough, these Hackney Borough posters talking about safe shopping, safe business, safe reopening, about making sure that actually not just businesses, but residents alike as customers are respecting social distancing, for example, and ensuring that the public realm itself is well managed. And we wouldn't expect Hackney Council not to be able to manage the public realm well, of course, but actually for the first time, I'm sure that my cabinet colleagues would agree, Councillor Snell, when we would say that actually for the first time there is some real cross-service area working going on, whether it's between enforcement, licensing, whether it's about planning, whether it's about business support and development, and so the list goes on. This bodes well for the future. Mr. Speaker, we're ensuring that the Council remains connected and engaged with local businesses. There are now over 6,000 local businesses registered to the Hackney Business Network. The Mayor and myself have been, and indeed will be, we are continuing to do so, attending local business forums that are based in our main town centres, so that businesses have the opportunity to talk to both the Mayor and myself about problems, about issues, about challenges, and where there are problems that the Council can resolve, then under the Mayor's leadership, those problems can be resolved. These are proving to be incredibly successful and extraordinarily well received. We are without doubt, Mr. Speaker, kind of redefining and re-engineering that relationship with our local economy and all of those that make it work. Going forward, Mr. Speaker, it is really important that our absolute focus is on creating an active economy in an active borough, because only then can we deliver on our inclusive economy objectives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Councillor Snell.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. I'm always, I'm really impressed with your timekeeping. Good. Councillor Snell, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you. That was a very reassuring answer, but I'll be writing to you privately, particularly about the entertainment and cultural sector, because I know we're doing stuff in that area and I don't think you covered it. But thank you. That's enough for tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Snell.
Mr. Speaker, if I may just briefly acknowledge Councillor Snell's well-made comments about the creative and cultural sectors and the entertainment and leisure sectors. They are indeed facing extraordinary challenges in these extraordinary times, and I look forward to having that dialogue with Councillor Snell and seeing how we can collaborate and support them where we can. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson, and thank you, Councillor Snell. Councillor Lynch, please ask your question.
As set out, Mr. Speaker.
Deputy Mayor Renensin, will you please respond? You have up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it feels very strange not to be standing up to address the Speaker, sort of undoing 6 years of training Thank you, Councillor Lynch, for this question. And along with you, and I'm sure all colleagues here tonight, I likewise pay tribute to everyone who has helped keep London running at this time. We rightly talk about the NHS and carers whose contribution has been phenomenal, but there are thousands of people whose contribution may have been less visible, but just as vital. Everyone from those driving our buses, keeping supermarket shelves stocked, our hospitals clean and our parks safe. The list is endless and we would not have got through this without them, and it is right that we thank and acknowledge them. It is also therefore right that we talk about housing, and your question is very timely. It's right that we talk about the fact that spiralling property prices mean many of those who give so much to the borough can't afford to live here. A response here in Hackney is threefold. And I'm going to apologise in advance because I've taken the steer to be brief in our responses very seriously. So please don't take the shortness of response as any sign that it isn't the intent behind it. And I'm happy to follow up with you outside of tonight's meeting. Firstly, it will come as no surprise to members here tonight that we're committing to continue to build new social rent homes here in the borough. We're looking at how we can expand our plans and become more ambitious, directly bringing forward the homes that residents need. Secondly, and aware that building new homes takes time, we're calling for local housing allowance to be retained at the 30th percentile, which the government returned it to and we've been calling for a number of years at the start of the crisis, and further raised to its original 50th percentile. Aware that not everyone might be as up on their housing benefit as I am, this would mean that for those on low incomes in the borough having to rent in the private sector, at least half of properties would be affordable. And thirdly, we've introduced Hackney Live and Rent. This is a rent, importantly, based on income, not property prices. It offers the opportunity of a secure tenancy with a trusted landlord at a fair rent. And I hadn't even included shared ownership because I was trying to be so brief, but obviously you touched earlier on the opportunity presented by shared ownership properties in the borough, and we will continue to deliver those and bring further schemes forward. These are just some of the steps that we're taking to ensure those that give so much to our borough are able to live in the community they serve.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Renison. That was very swift. Councillor Lynch, do you have a supplementary question?
No, Mr. Speaker, but thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Renison, for that response.
Thank you, Councillor Lynch. Councillor Ayers, please ask your question.
I'll set out.
Councillor Kennedy, will you please respond?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Councillor Hayhurst, in his question, is referring to discussions at the North East London level with the Berks NHS Trust about their laboratory at the Royal London Hospital. That laboratory currently analyses tests for NHS staff and patients, but it does have the technical capacity to scale up and to be able to do more tests. Despite the government announcing on July the 3rd that all care home staff could be tested weekly, the government portals for ordering those tests are still proving very sluggish and oversubscribed, Mr. Speaker, and the turnaround times are very poor, hence the desire to have more local testing. However, there is a global lack of reagent. That's the vital ingredient that helps every test be carried out. The UK supply of reagent is controlled and meted out by the Department of Health and Social Care, and they will not increase the allocation of reagents to the Berks lab. We're not aware that allocations are disproportionate to any other region. We're also not aware of the government's own lighthouse laboratories hoarding stocks of reagent. But we do believe that government laboratory turnaround times should be much quicker. On average, they take 2 to 3 days to turn around a test, whereas Berks are averaging just 24 hours. Through our learning network status, Mr. Speaker, which we hold within the National Test and Trace system, we are continuing to lobby both for better national performance and also for more local reagent supplies. I've also raised the issue of reagent supply and local testing with Meg Hillier MP, and she has agreed to bring it up at a parliamentary level. With health partners in the North East London area, we are also investigating more effective local coordination of the national testing offer. And I'll finish up, Mr. Speaker, with the news that we're working with our local GPs on a testing trial that is being run by Queen Mary's University London. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Ayers, do you have a supplementary question?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ayers. Councillor Reyes, please ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, as set out.
Councillor Williams, will you please respond? You have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Race, for giving me the opportunity to set out changes made to Hackney Works, the Council's employment and support and job brokerage service. In April 2020, we reorganised the Hackney Works provision and structure in order to focus on the urgent task of providing support for the large number of residents who found themselves unemployed during the coronavirus pandemic, and in order to ensure residents have the skills needed to progress into what's going to be a very challenging labour market. Mr. Speaker, members will be pleased to hear that the Adult Learning Service team and the Employment and Skills Service team will be integrated in the coming months with the aim of ensuring that adult education and training is aligned to the Council's ambition to ensure residents have the skills needed to access quality employment opportunities. During and following the period of coronavirus lockdown, Hackney Works has focused on 3 key areas: supporting residents with benefits, better off into work calculations, budgeting support and signposting to relevant services through the Information Advice and Guidance Service. With employability support by helping them with job search, applying for jobs, accessing training and preparing for interviews. And the third strand of work is job brokerage. This is through matching and putting clients forward for job opportunities with a focus on supporting recruitment to council, supply chain and wider opportunities across local institutions, partner organisations, etc. Mr. Speaker, on adult learning, the priorities are on developing an adult learning curriculum that covers 4 main subject areas: vocational training, functional skills, maths and English and ICT, ESOL, community and family learning. Planning for each curriculum area is directly aligned to the objectives of the Council on a robust evidence base and priorities identified in a number of key Council documents. A focus will also be based on an inclusive rebuilding approach that builds trust and confidence in the economy and in the labour market. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Reyes, do you have a supplementary question?
No, that's everything. Thank you very much to Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Councillor Reyes. Councillor Patrick, please ask your question.
As set out, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Selman, will you please respond? You have up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Councillor Patrick, for his extremely timely question. Mr. Speaker, later this evening, we're expected to adopt a motion which will set out Hackney Council's unequivocal commitment to tackling systemic racism and pledging to publish our anti-racist programme of work across council services in a publicly available report. But importantly, it will also be pledging us to call on our partners and the borough's anchor institutions to do the same. And as the motion indicates, it is really vital that that includes the local police. Mr. Speaker, it feels incredibly poignant that we are both adopting that motion and that I'm responding to this question on what was the evening of the 3rd anniversary of the death of Roshan Charles. Roshan should not have died that night, and the impact of his death and the subsequent investigation left a strong sense of powerlessness, fear and anger for many within our community. I would strongly urge anyone who has not done so to read the article in this week's Hackney Gazette by Rod Charles, Roshan's great-uncle and himself a former Metropolitan Police Chief Inspector, which powerfully captures both that impact, but also why the subject of Councillor Patrick's question is so important. No one reading that article could be left in any doubt of the urgency and need to tackle structural racism that exists across British society today and within the criminal justice system and the police. It also reflects why we are clear as a council for the need for action and not review. 50 national reports over the last half-century should be enough for anyone, and likewise in Hackney, we have the benefit of not starting from scratch. As a council, we already know and firmly recognise the need to address confidence and trust in both policing and wider statutory services, and to tackle the systemic racism that underlies the stark figures and disproportionality to which Councillor Patrick's question alludes, and the trauma and the hurt that harms our communities as a direct result. This includes recognising the need to put the voice of those most impacted, including the voices of younger residents, at the heart of ensuring change, and that is reflected in the approach that we have been taking over the last year. Hackney's Youth Stop and Search Monitoring Group was set up back in February 2012, complementing the existing adult group and holding the Met to account on stop and search practices in Hackney. In 2019, they expanded into account, expanding their role beyond stop and search to include all matters related to community safety and policing. In July 2019, they started a research programme, recruiting young people from across Hackney to carry out extended interviews and analysing data, culminating in a research report and set of recommendations, a summary of which was presented at the Living in Hackney Scrutiny Commission, to which Councillor Patrick's question refers. They are working closely with Hackney's Young Futures Commission, which, as members know, was also established in 2009 as an independent, young person-led, extensive engagement and co-production exercise, which I've been honoured to co-sponsor with Deputy Mayor Bramble, and which, alongside Cabinet colleagues, we adopted the recommendations of on Monday this week. This review reflects the experience of a huge number of young people across the borough, and it makes clear that the issue of trust and confidence in policing is of vital importance to our young residents. Both groups are working hand in hand with Young Hackney, our youth parliament, and that he and colleagues are now working with us in order to develop both that action plan and a broader, clear anti-racist strategy. Priority initial actions are likely to include mechanisms to ensure greater accountability to the community,
Councillor Sermon, you've got a minute left.
support for individuals who have had a negative encounter with the police, and high quality training for police at all levels, including senior leaders, developed from the existing work being rolled out within the council under the leadership of Councillor Williams. Hackney is not, however, an island, and the Metropolitan Police Service is a London-wide organisation, and many of the changes will need to be supported at that level too. Both the Mayor and I have met in recent weeks with representatives of both the Met Police and the London Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime, emphasising the importance of this agenda, ensuring we are linking in local Hackney organisations to ensure that their action plans are being developed, reflecting a strong Hackney voice. I also know that this work has a strong ally in the form of Councillor Patrick and the members of the Living in Hackney Scrutiny Commission, who, as we saw last month, take their role in challenging and holding the police and the wider community safety partnership to account extremely seriously. And they will be keeping a BDI on progress, and I look forward to working closely with them in doing so. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Sermon. Councillor Patrick, do you have a supplementary question?
No, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since we're going to be discussing the item later, I think we can cover any other points then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Patrick. Councillor Root, please ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, as set out.
Thank you. Councillor Buck, will you please respond? You have up to 5 minutes to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Councillor Root, for your question. Before I answer it, I would also like to thank you for your consistent support for the Park Service and interest in the functioning of the service throughout the incredibly difficult lockdown period. You have, both in spirit and in letter, embodied the spirit of what a good Labour councillor is, placing the interests of the working class first and foremost in the work that you have done as a councillor. Now, in terms of the specific question, the council has long recognised the impact that quality parks and green spaces can have on the achievement of its vision and objectives, has therefore placed a high priority on improving them, with over £25 million of investment in parks and green spaces since 2010, one of the contributing factors in the 27 green flags that the borough proudly holds. Hackney's parks and green spaces are integral to and essential to the borough's resilience meeting its future challenges and the delivery of its wider strategies, both at a community and individual level. And the last 4 months have highlighted this more than ever. To keep our parks and green spaces open, clean and safe during the COVID-19 crisis, we've had to invest in them further, with additional sums being spent on additional bins and the emptying of those bins, £95,000, £72,000 for additional toilet cleaning, £60,000 for banners and signage, £50,000 for cleansing, £180,000 for enforcement and security, and £35,000 for supplies and services. These are just some of the additional circa £500,000 of additional estimated costs involved in keeping our parks maintained and safe during the pandemic. Some of those costs, of course, could have been avoided had some of the people who had visited some of our green spaces in the borough shown a level of respect that we had repeatedly requested they do. But they nevertheless demonstrate the commitment of the park service to providing well-maintained and safe spaces for our residents at this difficult time and for long into the future. Thank you, Councillor Rant.
Thank you, Councillor Bob. Councillor Rapp, do you have a supplementary question?
No, I don't. I'd just like to thank Councillor Burke for his kind words, and also to say that, in my view, the money that we've spent on the parks has been extremely well spent for both the mental and the physical health of all our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Root. Councillor Rathbone, please ask your question.
As set out, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Councillor Nicholson, will you please respond? You have 5 minutes to do so.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Rathbone, for your question about the borough's markets. Councillor Rathbone, I know you are more than aware of this, and thank you for your support for the market service. I know that there are many officers who appreciate your support and your engagement, and on occasion your advice too, and that is well received. So thank you, Councillor Rathbone, on a personal kind of level. But your question really is not about your contribution, it's about what the contribution of our street markets is to our borough. And I think that we have all seen some extraordinary contributions that have been taking place over the course of the lockdown period. The borough's markets created a central street market hub. That was Ridley Road Street Market, and it became the place where traders could sell their wares, providing they were selling essential items such as food, for example, and important and essential household goods. What I will say, Mr. Speaker, is that over the course of the lockdown itself, over 2,000 people were attending over the course of a day to buy goods from the street traders, fruit, vegetables, fresh food, and essential items. Many thousands of individuals were using the Rose food vouchers, which enabled them to buy fresh fruit and vegetables from market traders by the simple exchange of a voucher. Traders were then reimbursed for the cost of that produce that they had passed on to those individuals. Mr. Speaker, I think it is something just to bear in mind here. What we are talking about are our street markets in our borough, providing a necessary service, a service that actually meets real need in our communities. And it's showing no signs of changing as we move gradually away from lockdown, but with social distancing still very much in place. Last weekend, Mr. Speaker, over 5,000 paying customers visited Ridley Road Street Market. The numbers are increasing now in Hoxton Market, and Hoxton Street Market is beginning to come back to life. Kingsland Road, Kingsland Waste Market, likewise coming back to life. And for the first time this weekend, working with the small businesses and some of the first wave of traders to open up on Chatsworth Road, took the first steps to reopening Chatsworth Road Market. to great success, I must add, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think going forward, what we are seeing is an extraordinary kind of demonstration of an active borough, an active economy, something that I referred to in a previous response to colleagues, Councillor Snell, about ensuring that actually Hackney is open for business, but it is doing it in a safe and managed way for both those who are traders and for those who are customers. And long may that remain the case. And the intention over the course of the summer is to open up all of Hackney's street markets and to ensure that all are thriving going forward. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Radbourne, do you have a supplementary question? You have to unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, please.
No, sorry. I was just going to say thank you very much to Councillor Nicholson for all the work that he has been doing, and also thank you to the markets team who've done a wonderful job during the lockdown and are really facing up to the challenges. So I look forward to seeing thriving Hackney markets again in due course.
Thank you, Councillor.
And sorry, Mr. Speaker, if I might just thank Councillor Rathbone for that and just echo his congratulations, his compliments and his support for those who are working and make up Hackney Council's market service. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. We have now reached the end of the 30 minutes allocated time frame. I would like to thank members who have submitted questions. Those members whose questions were unable to be answered due to insufficient time will receive a written response. Thank you. Agenda item 7, Mayor Glanville, elected mayor statement. Mayor Glanville, would you like to make your statement to the council? You have up to 10 minutes to address the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before I start, I'd like to echo your own remarks and tribute to the 224 residents that we've lost due to COVID-19, and also the over 850 who have tested positive for the disease. I think we all know that these are members of our community, parents, grandparents, children, carers, friends, community leaders, and of course, NHS, council and key worker heroes, who not just put themselves at risk to help others, but they indeed leave a gap in the lives of those that knew them and the borough as a whole. There were sadly too many to name individually, but we remember them tonight alongside former Councillor Pinter and Councillor Steve Scott, who passed away since we last met. It's much harder to remember virtually, but I pay tribute to all of those that have organised online vigils that I know you have been a part of, Mr. Speaker, and other members here tonight. Remembering and marking those lives is incredibly important, and the opportunity to come together, whether it was at Ashgrove Bus Garage or indeed Clapton Commons, where there was a memorial wall, was an incredibly moving and important moment. I also want to pay tribute to 3 councillors that have stepped down since our last meeting in February. Councillor Aaron Klein represented Stamford Hill West and has stepped down due to ill health. It would be fair to say that on politics, representation, public health and morality, I almost entirely disagreed with Councillor Klein on almost everything. But I'd still like to wish him my best wishes for a speedy and full recovery. Councillor Tom Rahilly, who stepped down and represented Kings Park Ward since 2014, has gone on to a new role as Assistant Director for Communities and Social Policy at the GLA. And I'm sure he didn't think that in his first few days he would be responsible for working with London boroughs on food poverty, humanitarian assistance during this crisis. He was an incredible colleague and chair of the Children and Young People Scrutiny Commission. He was also the council's first mental health champion, making sure that mental health was a priority for the council, and he had a passion for campaigning locally and nationally for better mental health services and a parity of esteem. He ensured that we celebrated Mental Health Awareness Week, and he was also, as you know, Mr. Speaker, a stalwart champion of the Mind in Hackney and their collaboration with Sporting Hackney, which is one of your charities. I know he will remain an active member of the community and would like to wish him all the best in his new job and the future. I paid an ample tribute last time to Deputy Mayor Clark as she became the MP for Enfield North, but since we met last time, she has also stepped down, but she's making an incredible impact in the House of Commons as the Shadow Secretary of State for Local Government PPS. I know ensuring that Labour's voice in local government is heard on the front bench and the government is held to account. I think from the start, Mr. Speaker, we felt that having virtual council meetings and ensuring and maintaining transparency and democratic accountability is vital as we move through this crisis. We swiftly moved all of our meetings online, and I'd like to thank all those from across the council, including the governance team and our digital teams, for making this happen. We've now held 4 virtual cabinet meetings, and in June alone, there were 15 virtual meetings, totaling 23 hours, 59 minutes of democracy on YouTube and local government in action. I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, like you, I'm looking forward to catching up on all of those during whatever type of summer break that we get. But seriously, hundreds of Hackney residents have been able to engage, protest, and see themselves represented in new ways. So I reiterate my thanks to the governance team for making sure that this can go ahead, and particularly to Tess Merritt, who we celebrated last council meeting because she was going to take early retirement, but she stayed on during the pandemic to ensure that our governance could continue and to help out her successor, who's also on screen, Andrew, who's taken on this role. I'm sure they're big shoes to fill, but we wish her well in her retirement and welcome Andrew to the team. Mr. Speaker, it's no doubt that since we last met, the world has changed, and the priorities that we set in our budget to make Hackney a fairer, safer and healthier and more sustainable place feel more timely than ever. We spoke about £500,000 being invested in projects to help our poorest residents, including those families in food poverty. And we also talked about investing more in our council tax reduction scheme. I highlighted additional investments to help people lead healthier lives, to expand our rough sleeper outreach team, to provide better mental health and housing advice, and also the sustainability that has shaped all of the debates this evening so far. Who knew how timely those investments would be and how they would improve our resilience during this crisis? It's vitally important that we make good on those investments and continue those into the future. The pandemic has had a huge impact on the borough's lives and continues to be the most disruptive period for over a generation. 34,000 employees from Hackney businesses have been furloughed. Hackney's Job Centre Plus centres are processing around 1,000 new universal credit applications a week and a 60% increase since the beginning of March. We've also seen big increases in questions of support from the council. The challenges that the borough face will continue, but I pay tribute to the residents, volunteers and local charitable organisations, as well as those council staff and those other key workers for all they've achieved over the last 4 months. What we've done has been truly heroic. During the crisis, the administration and the senior leadership of the council set out clear priorities to support the local NHS and help save lives, to work cooperatively with our communities and to help the most vulnerable, and we directly intervened in the local economy alongside the government support to protect livelihoods. We also sought to maintain and protect those crucial frontline services throughout. We now have the opportunity this evening to reflect on those last 4 months and see those issues around poverty, equality and sustainability, and ensuring that well-funded public services are at the forefront of the national debate. Under a Labour administration in Hackney, these issues have always been our priority, but never more so do we have to ensure that we do build that fairer and safer, more sustainable Hackney that we are elected to do, and that is our mission that we restate this evening. I will not dwell on the climate emergency because it's been essentially discussed this evening, but I fully support the paper that comes next at full council, and thank Councillor Burt for his visionary leadership, not just in Hackney, but across the country, and all those officers that have supported us during this work. I hope, Mr. Speaker, that our Green Party friends that joined us at the start of the meeting can see there is no bolder administration anywhere in the country, and that when Hackney Labour acts, it acts with deeds and not just words. Mr. Speaker, we have a really important motion later this evening, and I think it illustrates why for many in this country and in this borough, there is no going back to normal before this crisis, because normal was not working for our residents. Coronavirus has exposed the inequality in our country and clearly left certain communities more vulnerable and disproportionately impacted by the crisis. This is particularly true for the 70% of people in Hackney who died as a result of this virus who were born from outside the UK. Public Health England data shows that if you are black, you are twice as likely to die from coronavirus. An initial analysis amongst deaths from health and social care staff suggests that 63% of those deaths were from diverse backgrounds. That is why we have been resolute from the start and why Councillor Williams and I supported the We Need Answers campaign during this crisis. The statistical analysis from Public Health England or even our own public health team is not enough. We need answers around disproportionality and will continue to fight for justice. We also called for an independent inquiry into the government's response to this crisis, and I'm really pleased that Councillor Williams has already got a meeting with the Equality and Human Rights Commission to take forward that work. The disproportionate impact of the virus has also been compounded by events in the US since the start of May, as the world watched the murder of George Floyd at the hand of the Minneapolis police. I've said before, we cannot allow George Floyd's life to be defined by his death, and the Black Lives Matter movement is something that we must continue to support. Whether it's George Floyd's death in the US, Sarah Reid's in the UK, or as Councillor Selman has vividly said, the 3rd anniversary that we're marking this evening of Rashan Charles's death in our own borough, these issues are alive and vitally important to the residents that elected us here to the Town Hall. That's why I welcome the motion this evening.
You've got a minute left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will come to the financial challenges that the Council faces in the corporate plan, but we will continue to oppose any attempt to impose any form of new austerity. And I think it's really important to say, Mr. Speaker, we were expecting a new deal from this government, not a meal deal and not the trite campaign to eat out, to help out. Millions of people in this country don't have the opportunity to eat out in a given week, never mind after this crisis. And that is why we're focused on poverty and ensuring that no one in Hackney goes hungry. We need to ensure that, as we have done, that the government makes good on its commitment to ensure that local government can respond to this crisis going forward and that we're fully reimbursed for the costs that we've spent in responding. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to end with thanking all of the council staff, the local NHS, the Homerton, who obviously got that wonderful outstanding CQC rating, and all of that frontline and back office response that's ensured we can get through this crisis. My colleagues in the Cabinet, the senior leadership of the Council, and all of you as frontline councillors have been critical to this work, as well as our new Director for Public Health, Dr. Husbands. We have lost a lot, Mr. Speaker, but what we have not lost is our Hackney spirit and our determination to ensure that our borough is more equal coming out of this crisis than it was going in. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. May I call on Councillor Sternberger? Would you like to respond? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
5 minutes. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to start off with, obviously, this whole COVID situation basically is a new thing in life which we're experiencing now. And it's very sad that we've lost so many people in Hackney and in worldwide, whether it's America, Spain, England. And the problem is that we don't even know currently where we are, how we are. And I want to thank officers also for all the work. And I also want to go over what the Mayor said, thanking Tess for actually jumping back in. You know, despite the fact that we said last time that she's gone, she actually came to help us out in the crisis. So I would like to thank Tess for the good work. I will start off with asking, Christopher Sills had a question tonight. It's not on the agenda. I don't know what happened there. I don't know for what reason it's not appeared. The second thing is, I think that it's a shame that the last person who had the question, we couldn't respond to them, because I think the question was a very good question. And it just disencourages people to come and ask questions when they're told they're going to get answers by email. We can do this with the councillors, but just one extra question wouldn't have harmed anybody. And I'm not pleased to see this, that we couldn't respond on the night. I want to move further on to It was very annoying to see my MP actually join in the with other speakers who are not on everybody's interest. You know, the mayor speaks so much about, you know, the individual communities and everything, and I'm a little bit surprised with our MP's behaviour, to say the least, and also with the local Labour member, who I believe the mayor knows, and it was not, especially now in the crisis, it's not the time now to, you know, to start mixing and speaking things which are not appropriate. And today the Sky News actually spoke about 7 people from the Labour Party who are going to be paid out. Also, again, got to do with things from not the right talk and basically messing around different communities. It's not really welcome, this whole shenanigan. I'm also very surprised that despite the council actually losing the court in planning, I heard tonight from the cabinet members saying somewhat we didn't lose. I actually think it's about time we start opening our eyes, and when we lose something, we actually look what the problem is. You know, we've lost a court case. The judge hasn't just said we've lost the court. We have to look and see how to do different. And the same, I would like to congratulate my local residents for the CPZ. They actually won the court, and the judge actually asked, what kind of inequality impact assessment is that? So actually, we talk all day about equalities. That equality impact assessment was horrendous. And I'm just wondering, you know, what are we doing? Furthermore, the residents are very annoyed about all these road closures and using COVID as an excuse when it's actually nothing to do with COVID. And just the government and the NHS have said the safest way to go around in life now is actually by driving a car. It was advertised everywhere. And the mayor himself also, in some of his letters, was writing that I don't know what's going on here, why we're playing around with COVID. I would also like to thank all the members who have resigned, whether it's our Councillor Klein for ill health. I want to thank him for all the work he's done. And again, Councillor Clark, who's now MP Clark, and the Kings Park Councillor. I would like to also finish by saying it's a shame in planning we have these things, not just what I said before about planning. A resident who lost her mother for COVID, her father from COVID, the same day, actually got not an enforcement, a prosecution notice in the middle of the high COVID. What is the council doing here? You know, there are better things to do. I really don't think the council is learning to actually work with residents, and I think we have to start looking around and see how we can improve local residents' health rather than making them more ill. So I'm just very, very, very annoyed that we still haven't learned from mistakes, and we can.
Stamberger, time up. Thank you. Mayor Glanville, would you like to exercise your right of reply?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you.
You have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Councillor Steinberger. I suppose I welcome some parts of what you had to say, but I think it really belies the gravity of the situation that we're facing, that you didn't really address the key political challenge going forward, which is that risk of government-imposed austerity. And I think it gives me the opportunity to say just how grave that situation is. A £69 million gap in the council's finances, and only 17.8 million has been received from government. Yes, there's 3.5 million to come. And yes, after intensive campaigning, including from our local MPs, we became part of a good practice network and were able to lobby for actually the first dedicated £3 million worth of funding for public health. But what we saw from the Chancellor in his signalling of a new spending review in no way understands the gravity of the financial challenge that the wider public sector faces in this country, but also Hackney Council. And I think a depressing half reheat of the Future Jobs Fund that the last Labour government left us, which shows what you need to have proper counter-cyclical investment in an inclusive economy. London boroughs face a £1.3 billion funding shortfall. So I would reiterate, I hope, unlike the last decade of austerity, that the Conservative Party in Hackney will finally stand up for our residents and fight for this borough, fight for the funding that underpins our services, and also the support within the welfare system that I know so many depend upon. There can be no borough in London that has done more against anti-Semitism than myself as mayor, this as a Labour administration, and also the Labour group that runs this. We've debated this issue extensively, and I think we've been very clear where we stand as a council and an administration. And indeed, we are about to roll out a programme of intensive work with our local police and hate crime officers around ensuring that all forms of hate crime and hate speech like anti-Semitism and homophobia and Islamophobic attacks were reduced. In terms of we need to do more to stop people falling ill, one of the big comorbidities for COVID is air pollution, Mr. Steinberg, Councillor Steinberger. So the constant opposition to tackling climate emergency, for tackling air pollution from the Conservative Party, belies any attempt for them to say that they believe in tackling the causes of ill health in this borough. What I will pay tribute to, though, is the tenacious support I've had from both Councillor Levy and Councillor Odds in ensuring that public health messages reach Stamford Hill and all those in the community. And they have been absolutely tireless, working alongside Hatzola and Interlink and many others, including the Rabbinate, to ensure that those messages were heard. And I know that we've put an intensive amount of work, including that mobile testing unit, to ensure that the community in Stamford Hill get all the support that they need to help tackle this virus. And, you know, there is no solution to air quality that doesn't involve not reducing car use and tackling air pollution around our schools. And that is why we have ambitious plans to do that, using the emergency powers that the government have supported and that are being rolled out across this country to tackle traffic and its impact. And I just take everyone back to that period of lockdown when our streets were empty of cars and how better the air quality was. Yes, there are essential key workers that need to use their cars.
You've got a minute left.
But that 15-minute city, that working and living and shopping and enjoying the local environment that can be done without cars is the vision that's set out this evening in our local plan, our corporate plan, and our response to climate change, Councillor Steinberger. So when we act, whether it's on anti-Semitism, climate, coronavirus, austerity, we act together, we act with our values, and I'm very proud of the record that I have as mayor and this administration is delivering for our borough. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. We will now adjourn the meetings to take a 5 minutes comfort break as scheduled in the agenda. Please, can all members turn their cameras and mics off? Can I please request that all members return to the meeting promptly, as we have a full agenda. So we coming back 1:45. So you having a 2 minutes extra. So 1:45. Thank you. Yes, I hope you're all refreshed. So we are back on the agenda. I will now move on to agenda item 8. I invite the Cabinet Member for Energy, Waste and Public Realm to introduce the report. You have up to 5 minutes to do so. Councillor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I begin?
Your camera is still on. Your camera is not on. And we can't hear you properly.
Can't be on. My camera should be on. My mic should be on.
Yes, you see you now. Nice hairstyle.
And can you hear me, Mr.
Yes,
Speaker?
I can hear you now, yes.
Then I'll commence. Mr. Speaker, in voting to declare a climate emergency at June 2019 full council, the Labour members of Hackney Council committed unanimously to do everything within their power to deliver against the stretching higher confidence threshold targets set by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's October 2018 1.5 degree report. This meant committing to 45% decarbonisation against 2010 levels by 2030 and achieving net zero emissions by 2040 across the council's full range of functions. Further, the motion passed by full council also committed the local authority to seek opportunities to make a greater contribution than its headline decarbonisation targets wherever possible. It is not possible, Mr. Speaker, given that there are over 50 individual substantive schemes and items of work that have been initiated over the last 12 months to go into detail to all of those at this stage, but I will attempt to do so very briefly on the headline figures. On energy decarbonisation, Mr. Speaker, on the 1st of April 2020, this council switched to 100% renewable electricity on £6.5 million worth of supply. We also launched in the last year this council's publicly owned, publicly accountable energy services company, Hackney Light and Power, which is in the process of not only delivering the £1 million Green Homes programme, which is offering free low carbon thermal efficiency measures to match the Climate Change Committee's commitment to treating thermal efficiency as a national infrastructure priority at the local level, but is also about to initiate the first of 2 large rooftop solar schemes this year. We have also initiated the asset management strategy for council housing, which means that no council properties below EPC rating C will be let beyond 2030, thanks to the good work of my cabinet colleague, Councillor Mackenzie. We replaced 2,500 streetlights with LED alternatives. That's 60% of our target by 2022 to eliminate all non-LED streetlights in the borough. We've approved the first 2 large rooftop solar schemes with many more in development. We've initiated the energy management system ISO 50001. We've begun to initiate the Hackney Energy Strategy, which is due for completion later in this year, which will allow the public to hold us to account on the work we've been doing in that area. On waste system decarbonisation, we've delivered the reduction and recycling plan over the last 12 months. We've approved the switch to fortnightly black bag residual waste collections for street properties, which will eliminate something in the region of 5,000 tonnes of incinerated waste a year. We've initiated a programme to ensure 100% of the North London Waste Authority areas recycling is processed within the UK, stimulating the country's circular economy whilst reducing transit emissions and ensuring our recyclates are processed ethically. We introduced the first estate-based reverse vending machine in the country. We're the first local authority to introduce a local authority-led library of things. We delivered the largest single-use plastic bottle running event in the country, eliminating 125,000 single-use plastic bottles in just one day, Mr. Speaker. We've also introduced the largest drinking fountain programme in the UK, and we've eliminated single-use plastics from Hackney Council catering service in the Town Hall complex. We've also produced formal written responses to the government's waste and resources strategy, and we've filed the first 7.5-tonne electric waste service vehicle And by switching to 100% recycled cooking oil fuel, we've been able in the waste service to displace 100,000 litres of diesel fuel every single year on our pathway to a fully decarbonised fleet.
Councillor Buck, you've got a minute left. You've got a minute
Mr.
left.
Speaker, thank you, Mr. Speaker. On transport system decarbonisation, members will be aware that we have committed to deliver a further 40 school streets by September 2020. We've delivered new segregated cycling infrastructure. We've delivered new modal filters. We have recently approved as a cabinet the first 2 low traffic neighbourhoods in this borough in 46 years, and are in the process of developing our emergency transport plan to address the serious secondary effects of coronavirus on the transport network. And there are so many more things we've done, Mr. Speaker, which are included in this report, and I do not have time to go into this evening.
Thank you.
Last year, Mr. Speaker, I informed the council that we as a council must not sit this one out, in the words of the great Carl Sagan, that we are by accident of fate alive at an absolutely critical moment in the history of our planet. To misquote Lenin, Mr. Speaker, there are decades where nothing happens, and there are years where decades happen. I like to think that this year has been one of the years in which decades have happened in defence of the environment and in defence of the future of the people of this borough. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I commend this report to full council.
Thank you, Councillor Bog. Would members like to debate the report? You will have up to 5 minutes to do so, and I've got Councillor Stubbs who wishes to speak. So, Councillor Stubbs.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to welcome this report generally, but I want to touch on the issue that Dr. Alex Armitage came to the council this evening on. He was talking about embedded carbon. He's been tweeting about embedded carbon and the fact that we're not doing enough as a council in terms of the construction of our flats and other people's developments. I have to say I was concerned about that, and it's disappointing. I pointed out to Mr. Armitage, Dr. Armitage, that he lives only a few hundred yards from the world's largest timber building on Dalston Works, and that represents, I guess, the high point of Hackney Council's efforts to decarbonise the concrete industry. So grow homes from timber rather than use one of the most problematic sources of carbon in the world. Hackney has spurred development across the planet because of its work on cross-laminated timber. I've been to Chicago and talked to Chicago people, and they built timber buildings, tall timber buildings. Austria, France has a requirement to use timber in 50% of its construction. Canada, the USA, Australia are all building tall timber buildings now. The reason we can't make much progress on this is twofold. One, the concrete industry. They will lobby like anything to persuade you that concrete is a renewable resource and grows on trees. And the sad tragedy of Grenfell. Grenfell clearly was a concrete building, but it caught alight. The repercussions of Grenfell.
Councillor Stubbs, you've got a minute left.
Repercussions of Grenfell have sadly affected people's confidence, and the government has woefully misunderstood combustibility of timber and is trying to bear down on its use at the moment. So those are the issues that Alex, Dr. Armitage and the Green Party locally should be addressing, not Hackney Council's willingness to promote low carbon building.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Stubbs. Can we note the update and content of the report?
Noted.
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 Noted. Noted.
Noted.
Thank you.
Noted.
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 I will now move to agenda item 9. There will be a roll call at the end of this item for the decision, and each of your name will be called in alphabetical order. When your name is called, please turn on your camera and indicate how you wish to vote on the recommendations set out in the report. Please simply state for, against, or abstain. May I invite Councillor Nicholson, Cabinet Member for Planning, Culture, and Inclusive Economy, to introduce your report. You have up to 5 minutes to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and hopefully I can be heard and vision is clear. Is that correct?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, thank you for that introduction. The paper before the Chamber this evening looks to our future and the future of development in our borough. It has been through an extensive process of consultation and evidence gathering over the last 4 years. It has involved, and please, this must be noted, the contributions of many councillors, both in our current administration and indeed in the previous administration as well. And for some of us fortunate enough to have served in both administrations to date, then that contribution has been sort of long-lived and much appreciated. Over this time, alongside members of the council, members of the community have also contributed, Mr. Speaker. Over 2,500 formal representations have been received by the council over the course of this consultation period, alongside hosting and managing numerous community events. Those community events involved residents as well as those who may be involved in the world of development, from architects through to developers themselves. All of this has culminated with a local plan that very recently was submitted to the planning inspector and for their formal decision on the viability and the suitability and the appropriateness of the borough's local plan. The planning inspector responded and has said that with some very, very minor adjustments and very minor comments, that actually Hackney's local plan holds true. I have to say, over this period of time, compliments should go not only to councillors and members of the community, but to council officers as well. Indeed, there is one particular planning officer, policy officer, Mr. Speaker, who is not able to join us this evening, certainly in virtual physicality, should we say. I was going to say in the chamber this evening, but as we've got a rather virtual one, that's clearly not sort of an appropriate description, because that particular planning officer is a new mum and she has just had a baby. So as well as adopting a local plan this evening, which I hope councillor colleagues will be minded to do so, we can perhaps celebrate the birth of a new resident and a young baby and congratulate the planning policy officer appropriately. I could talk about the policies that this forward-looking plan embraces and promotes and sets out to realise, Mr. Speaker. These policies, they touch upon all aspects of development, from our town centres to local high streets, from estates to neighbourhoods. It supports our flora and fauna to our open spaces. It delivers genuinely affordable homes, and it widens the landscape when it comes to delivering and levering out contributions for new affordable homes, alongside a very progressive and very, very forward-thinking affordable workspace policy. The Mayor and Councillor Stotts spoke of sustainable development over the course of the evening.
Councillor Nicholson, we've got a minute left.
Oh gosh, okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. That too is held in our new local plan. The reduction of emissions to the urban greening of our borough to Councillor Burke's nesting boxes. And just to clarify, Mr. Speaker, these nesting boxes are not for Councillor Burke's exclusive use, they are for Swifts. Enough. I could go on, but what must be said, Mr. Speaker, is that this policy was developed at a time when a pandemic and a lockdown that put a halt to our lives was neither anticipated or in place. These are unpredicted and unknown experiences we are faced with. So our challenge should be rightly, does this local plan still hold true? Can it still deliver for our borough? Mr. Speaker, our borough has seen no drop-off in planning applications over the lockdown. Our planning committee colleagues have continued to convene and determine. Our local town centres are becoming busier. Interest and investment into Hackney has not stopped. And this policy before you this evening is there to curate this, I'll just finish, Mr. Speaker, to curate this interest and investment and to do that for residents and our collective inclusive future. The policy before you delivers the Mayor's 15-minute city. It delivers our inclusive values. It delivers on creating a place for people to thrive, to grow up and to work in. I commend this local plan to the council and thank you, Mr. Speaker, for letting me slightly overrun.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Would members like to debate the report? You will have up to 10 minutes to do so.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, Councillor Sternberger, you got 2 minutes.
Yeah, I want to refer particularly to page 100 and 101, where if you look at paragraph B on top of 101, it says, it starts off a minimum of one family unit of 3 or more, and then it goes on to say a minimum of 1 4-bedroom family unit will be required. So it's, and then if you look at 7.21, which tries to explain it, again, it's all wishy-washy. So this document here is all over the place as usual. And it's very interesting. When Hackney have their own policy in building flats in Woodbury Down, they haven't built 1 4-bedroom. All of a sudden in Stamford Hill, when private people, when it's not feasible to build a 4-bedroom, they want them to build a 4-bedroom. So this whole thing is just a mess. But I'm not surprised. And there's many other things here. If you continue to 7.24, they talk about the neighbouring boroughs of Newham, Islington. No mention about Haringey with university. They got a massive university right at the beginning of Haringey, right near to Hackney. No mention about it. Obviously, they don't want to compare with Haringey for some reason. So to me, this document is totally unacceptable, and I will definitely be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson, you want to reply to that?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Councillor Steinberger. Councillor Steinberger, the primary focus of this local plan for our borough is to ensure that going forward there are affordable homes for people, and those homes will be of all sizes, however many or however few bedrooms. The purpose of the local plan is to ensure that what is opened up is a flow of investment. What it actually says is that for everybody who is building a residential home, whether it be 1, 10 or 100, they must make a contribution going forward to the building of a new affordable home. And that is a complete step change. And all communities in our borough, Councillor Steinberg, will benefit from this policy change. It is a very, very significant step that's been taken and that has been proposed. And of course, you are more than entitled to disagree with it. All I will say to you is that the planning inspector actually thinks it's quite a good idea.
Thank you.
I will also suggest to you that the majority of the community, and indeed of this council, also think that's a pretty good idea. So, Councillor Steinberger, I suggest that perhaps you revisit the local plan, and if you may find it beneficial, have a briefing led by planning officers so that you can understand fully all of the advantages that this local plan will unlock for every community in our borough. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson.
Mr. Speaker, just a point of clarity. He didn't answer my question, not at all. Wishy-washying around. I asked about a 4-bedroom, whether if you build a resident, an old person wants to build a 4-bedroom, it has to be a 4-bedroom or not. That's all I've asked. And I didn't get an answer. I didn't expect the answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sternberger. Any other contributors?
Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a short contribution.
Right, so you've got a minute. You've got a minute, Councillor Rees. Or is it Councillor
yes.
Mayoma? Sorry, Councillor Rees. Councillor
So
Mahama.
I would like to also, but Councillor Mahama was before my thing.
Okay, Councillor Mahama, we've got a minute, quickly.
It won't even take a minute. I just wanted to put on record my thanks to Natalie and congratulations to her, but also to Ian Ray, who has left the council, as many people will know, and just for the many visits over a period of 2 or 3 years that she and other officers made to Hackney Downs ward. We have been, as ward councillors, occasionally critical of the planning service, and including our part of Clapton in decision making, and so it's really pleasing to see that the local plan does take on board many of the recommendations and suggestions that people that live and work in Clapton put forward. And I look forward to working with Councillor Nicholson and others to make sure that it becomes a reality, and it's a really useful document in terms of shaping our community with lots of changes happening.
Thank you. Councillor Rees.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to speak in favour of the new local plan. I think it's a really good document that's taken. I know it's taken a long time to bring this into policy, so I want to congratulate everyone involved. In particular, I just want to say I'm fully supportive of the priority of delivering genuinely affordable housing. In particular, the removal of the threshold for affordable housing contribution or payment in lieu from above 10 units or above to anything between 1 and 9 units as well. As anyone who follows planning will know, significant numbers of housing applications come in, and they're usually between 1 and 9 units, and I think that's telling, and I think that this policy will go a long way to delivering more affordable housing in Hackney. I also want to talk very briefly in favour of the policy as it relates to delivering on the inclusive economy, particularly as it pertains. Yes.
Time is up now. Sorry.
Thank you. Fine.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Porter. You've got a minute, Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Councillor Race has largely covered what I was going to say, but I'd just like to add and thank Councillor Nicholson. I am one of those councillors who has been engaged throughout the previous administration, but also the current one, and I'd like to thank him for all of the work that he has done. I have seen him at many of those engagement meetings, and I think appreciation must be showed at the amount of work that he's put in. And of course, being a councillor in Brownswood Ward, I must add that I also appreciate the support for town centres, apologies, that also includes those across borough boundaries. So very much support this local plan being adopted.
Thank you. I'm taking the last speaker, which is Mayor Glanville or Councillor Odds. I'll just squeeze it in quickly. I will take the Mayor Glanville as the last one. So quickly, Councillor Odds.
Yeah, I just want to say that if for no other reason than that at this moment, the local housing market and general housing market is in free fall, and that this plan will only contribute to that free fall through its provisions, that it should be at the least suspended, and therefore I will be voting against it.
Thank you. Thank you. Mayor Glanville.
Very briefly, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I couldn't disagree with that last remark more, and just thank Councillor Nicholson and the team and all the contributions towards it. Just to help, perhaps, Councillor Steinberg, I think what he was referring to is where we have policy in place to stop the subdivision of existing family housing without preserving an element of family housing within whatever mix of dwellings comes out of that process. I appreciate that there was an ongoing dialogue around that issue. But that is what he was referring to. What I would just like to say is the work doesn't stop here. And I think Councillor Nicholson has been very clear in the planning service. We want to continue on that detailed engagement with many of our new emerging town centres, and obviously complete the Stamford Hill and Shoreditch area plans and the ongoing conversation in Dalston. And I think it's a testament to our ambition for the borough that we've not only got a successful local plan before us this evening, but then we want to take that work on into shaping our local communities and building that inclusive economy that has genuinely affordable housing at its heart.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. We will now move to the roll call. Thank you. Your name will be called alphabetically by test. Thank you.
Whether you, sorry, please turn your camera on when your name is called.
Yes, sorry.
Sorry, speaker keeps muting me. Right, Councillor Adams.
4.
Councillor Adajari.
I'm 4, but I've been advised I can't turn my camera on because my daughter's in view.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Bell.
4.
Councillor Billington.
4.
Councillor
4.
Bramble.
4.
Councillor Burke. Councillor Burke.
4.
Councillor Cameron. 4. Councillor Chapman.
4.
Councillor Chohan.
4.
Councillor Coburn.
4.
Councillor Conway. Councillor Conway. Not present.
She's accidentally left the meeting.
Okay, Councillor David. Councillor David.
4.
Councillor Desmond.
4.
Councillor Etty.
4.
Councillor Fajana Thomas.
4.
Councillor Garcia.
4.
Mayor Glanville.
4.
Councillor Gordon.
4.
Councillor Gregory.
4.
Councillor Hanson. 4. Councillor Hayhurst.
4.
Councillor Kennedy.
4.
Councillor Lufkin.
4.
Councillor Lynch.
4.
Councillor Maxwell.
4.
Councillor Mackenzie.
4.
Councillor McMahon.
4.
Councillor Moema. Councillor Moema.
4.
Councillor Nicholson.
4.
Councillor Odds.
Against.
Councillor August Canley.
4.
Councillor Ozen.
4.
Councillor Papier.
It's gone.
Councillor Patrick.
4.
Councillor Peters.
4.
Councillor Prouvier.
4.
Councillor Potter.
4.
Councillor Race.
4.
Councillor Rathbone.
4.
Councillor Renison.
4.
Councillor Rickard.
4.
Councillor Selman.
4.
Councillor Sharman.
4.
Councillor Smith.
4. Thank you.
Councillor Snell.
4.
Councillor Spence.
4.
Councillor Steinberger.
Against.
Councillor Stott. Councillor Stott.
4.
Councillor Webb.
4.
Councillor Williams.
4.
Councillor Woodley.
4.
Councillor Root.
4.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I will now move.
Sorry, I didn't get to give my vote because I accidentally exited when you called my name, Councillor Conway.
Okay, are you for or against Councillor Conway?
4.
Right, 4. Thank you. I will now move to agenda item 10. I invite Mayor Glanville to introduce the report. You have up to 5 minutes to do so. Thank you, Mayor Glanville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I said in my earlier speech, I think this crisis shows the most challenging period the council and the borough has faced in a generation. What I admitted from that earlier speech was an announcement that is linked to the later agenda item, which I'm very pleased to announce that we will be working with the local community to rename Castleton Road Gardens in Hackney Wick Ward to ensure that that memory of Sir John Cass is no longer present in one of our public spaces. This report outlines a closing period for the current crisis and a look back at how the council and the borough responded, and a look forward to our revisions to the corporate plan and political priorities going forward. It goes through how we've supported the local NHS system and helped save lives. So some of the highlights there, Mr. Speaker, are over 800,000 items of PPE have been issued, not just to council staff, but into the wider social care system and the NHS. Over 4,000 people have now been tested at the Dalston mobile testing unit, and I'm really pleased that it's returning next week and will be buttressed by the site at Yasoda Atora on 2 consecutive Sundays in Stamford Hill. We've also ensured that the social distancing work, both in terms of business and the public realm, has rolled out as Cabinet colleagues have outlined earlier. I'd like to pay a particular tribute to the work of all those in the council in adult social care that have supported the care system locally, and also our care home, St Joseph's Hospice, and the work of Anchor Hanover, who provide housing with care and supported housing in the borough. It has been a huge testament to the work of public health that they have supported all of those areas. We've also seen a huge outpouring of response from the voluntary sector, mutual aid and volunteers, 600 deployed through the council's own network, and a humanitarian response led by the council, but not crowding out the voluntary sector, that has ensured over 14,000 emergency food parcels have been delivered so far. We've also proactively called vulnerable people, that's in housing and adult social care, to ensure that they have been reached. And I pay particular tribute to all those people in the council that might be seen as a back office function that have led that humanitarian response as they've worked from home, whether that's in benefits and housing needs or the business rates team. And we've also made sure that we've added additional support to all of our discretionary grant processes. We've also, as Councillor Nicholson very vividly said, supported our local economy, ensuring places like Ridley Road never closed, that we had a timely payment of the government's grant system, that we invested in our own support for our tenants, and that's the voluntary sector tenants as well as commercial business tenants, and ensuring that they have the support they need. And I pay particular tribute to Hackney CVS, their networks and the countless community conversations, and Volunteer Centre Hackney for their response, as well as the work of the Hackney Business Network. We've also invested £12 million in our vital frontline services and ensuring those services continued through this council crisis as a council. I said earlier why our commitments are, and I just wanted to reiterate them, that we will support our communities, we will support this borough to rebuild a fairer economy, and that will ensure that that economic recovery is a green and inclusive one. Our ambitions include, as set out in this report, to take this opportunity for that once-in-a-generation end to rough sleeping, to ensure that no one in Hackney goes hungry, the vulnerable get the support they need, we have that inclusive economy, that we ensure that all those in the borough that need skill support, whether they're leaving school, making an education transition, or indeed at the end of furlough, face losing their jobs, get the support they need through Hackney Works or Adult Skills Service that will be integrated, as Councillor Williams said. And we're continuing to develop the genuinely affordable homes that we need. And only today we announced new homes going on site in
Mayor Glanville, you've got a minute left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're also committed to closing that digital divide. It's an absolute disgrace that the government only very latterly dispatched those laptops to our most vulnerable young people, but we've got an ambitious programme of improving connectivity in the borough and ensuring that community buildings get the connectivity we need. We're also really committing to 2 really important strategies, and not just the revision to the corporate plan, but Hackney Young Futures Commission work that went to Cabinet on Monday evening, and also the Ageing Well strategy. We have illustrated that we have done through this crisis and into the future whatever it takes to support our services and residents in this borough. but we cannot do that without proper funding going forward. This is not an emergency budget, and Deputy Mayor Renison will outline our financial position shortly. But what it does illustrate is how we continue to show that ambition, that we do it with the resources that we have available, and we show that frontline leadership that our residents would expect. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. Would members like to debate the report?
Yes.
Councillor Renison, you've got 2 minutes. Councillor Renison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll try and be briefer than that if I can be. This is just to draw members' attention to the appendix that comes with this report, which sets out the medium-term financial plan for the council in the light of coronavirus. We've been reporting regularly on the in-year shortfall that we face as a council, and Mayor Glanville's already touched on that 69 million gap that we have to look to bridge. This report starts to take a longer-term look. This is made in the context of a large number of remaining unknowns. We don't know how long social distancing will continue for, and we don't know the longer term impact on the economy. We know it stretches well beyond this year, and we don't know what future central government funding will look like. However, this report sets out an indicative forecast for the 21 to 22 financial year. We've presented 3 cases. It would be only right to do so given that level of uncertainty. The medium case, which is the one we're working to, would see a 33.5 million shortfall for that year. Best case scenario gets us to 11 million. Worst case takes us up to 52 million. It's only right to acknowledge that we have had support from central government. The Mayor touched on the figures earlier. It takes us to just over 21 million now, and partial support to help us meet lost income. But as we move into planning for future financial years, we really need that certainty on central government funding, and we'll clearly be feeding into the comprehensive spending review that has now been announced, stressing the role of local government in helping tackle the pandemic, and the need to place local government finance on a sustainable footing. And put simply, after a decade of austerity, we've had 140 million taken out of our budget. We can't go through further rounds of cuts. We don't support it, the public don't support it, and we need central government to commit to fund local government to deliver the services our residents both need and deserve.
Right. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Renison. Self-correction. Councillor Stamberger, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to refer to page 15 and then to page 26. Page 15, the paragraph as we start to come out of lockdown. Unfortunately, we're still not out of any lockdown, and I think this is somewhat a little bit, premature, because there's it's now unfortunately, a second flow of the virus. I hope that there won't be any more casualties, but I'm a bit skeptical about that paragraph. The following paragraph, you talk about the monies you spend. There's no indication what exactly the monies are. So again, I don't know why I can't say properly what the monies are all about. Page 26 is something which particularly takes me. There are specific religious barriers. I must say, I'm more than a little bit very disappointed, because at the beginning, when the government said there would be special meals for people who are vulnerable, people in the local area from where I live actually called up for the local meals. And when you get Meals on Wheels, you actually get the food you require. And for some reason, they were sending to the local residents food which they couldn't even eat. And I know for myself that there was a restaurant, a local restaurant called Asado, which actually gave out over 300 meals, and the community had to pay for it. So I think it's a little bit jumbled up, this page 26, because at the beginning, the first few weeks, it was terrible, and the council does have knowledge, so the council should have done better than that, than have vulnerable people getting the wrong meals and a waste of money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stamberger. Mayor Glanville, you want to come in to reply to that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just building on what Councillor Renison has said about the financial position, and to reiterate, this isn't an emergency budget, and we're not proposing cuts to services, but unless the government gets the clear message in that spending review, we will face significant challenges ahead. Councillor Steinberger, the detail was in the April OFP, the May OFP, the June OFP and the July OFP that went to Cabinet. It had attached to each one of those documents our returns to MHCLG showing how we'd spent our money and where our cost pressures were. This is an update to the corporate plan and an update to the MTFP, as Deputy Mayor Renison has said, but all of that detail has been put into the public domain on a timely basis. And I should have said apologies, Mr. Speaker, for not tabling this paper earlier, but a lot of that financial detail, as we said at Cabinet on Monday night, we wanted to ensure was up to date and conformed with the government announcement. In terms of reduction in lockdown, anyone that is in our streets and town centres sees that they're a lot busier than they were during lockdown. And one of the reasons why our emergency transport plan is so important is because so many people are driving through this borough. I have been commuting to and from where I live almost every single day since the start of this crisis. There were no cars on Richmond Road at the start of this crisis, and now there is often gridlock. That is completely unacceptable, and our kids and our most vulnerable people deserve better. The humanitarian response that you're attacking, Councillor Steinberger, is the government's. There was absolutely no culturally specific food or dietary specific food for any of the 7,300 families in this borough that were shielding on the government's list. The people that stepped in were council officers and the voluntary sector in Hackney. We put £30,000 into ensuring that there could be a community response to the needs of our diverse communities in our own humanitarian response, and that is what we put in place as soon as we could do so. Absolutely disgusting packages sent out by the government with absolutely no sensitivity at all. And as far as I'm aware, that didn't improve through the crisis at all. And it was the council's humanitarian response that ensured that people got what they need, both for cultural reasons and diet. And we've worked with voluntary sector organisations to ensure that happens. And going forward, that is our model. It is working with the community to ensure that people get what they need and with that degree of cultural sensitivity.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. Councillor Odds, can you make your contribution, please?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You've only got 2 minutes. You've got 2 minutes.
I will.
You are the last one. You've got 2 minutes.
Long, Mr. Speaker. I just want to say that I can in no way support this plan for the simple reason that what the Mayor announced about the renaming of Castle Road is an absolute disgrace, that we are taking away the name of a huge benefactor from this borough, and that there is nobody in this world that is perfect. Yes, he was involved in the slave trade. Many others have been involved in many things, and we laud them for what they did that is good. We don't always need to look at the bad. He was a huge benefactor to this borough and to the country. And to take away his family's name from Castle Road, I think is a huge disgrace. And secondly, I would like to, can I just finish by saying that I would like to agree with what the Mayor said about and congratulate those officers and councillors that were involved in the distribution of food, and that they did help the Jewish community and other communities get culturally appropriate food, which, as he said, this government didn't do a thing about. In this case, I will call out the government because they failed.
Thank you. Mayor Glanville, do you want to have a quick comment there?
I just wanted to provide a point of clarification for Councillor Odds. The renaming of Castle Road forms no part of the corporate plan update. I'd omitted it from my speech earlier on, and I won't be taking part in the debate on the motion to allow backbenchers to speak. And I wanted to make sure that was heard in line with the review of public spaces that we launched. And I think I don't understand Councillor Odds' point of view, although I heard it. And the Sir John Cass Foundation is actively seeking to change its own name to reflect where we are today and remove that legacy of slavery. So we've got support of the foundation. We're looking at our park. We're not renaming the road at the moment. And just to finish, thank you very much for your kind words. I know a huge amount of effort went into making sure that we did get that culturally sensitive and specific support in our humanitarian response. Nobody's ever perfect, and I can't pretend that mistakes weren't made, but it was at our heart to reflect our diverse communities and what we did. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Glanville. Can we agree to note the content of this report?
Agreed.
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 Noted.
Agreed.
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 Thank you.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. I will now move to agenda item 11, members' allowances scheme. At the end of the debate, if any members does not want to agree the report, please turn your camera on so your decision against the report can be noted. I invite the Chief Executive, Tim Sheets, to introduce the report.
Mr.
Chief
Speaker,
Executive.
given time, my introduction is as laid out.
Thank you. Would members like to debate the report? No. Okay.
Yes, I
Okay,
would.
thank you. Okay, Councillor Odds.
Yeah, I will say what I have said for the past 14 years. It's somewhat invidious, although I know it is law, it is invidious that we have to decide on our own remuneration. And therefore I will be voting against this report in order to make a point and hope that that point will go further with other representations that I will be making to government. This should be decided totally by an independent body, and we should have no say in the matter, even to the council. Thank
you. So, noted, Councillor Odds, you voted against, right? Thank you.
That's correct, I'm against.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, I'm moving on.
Mr. Speaker.
Councillor Stamberger, are you voting against or you
I'm
for?
definitely voting against. It goes back to what I've said all the years. We're playing football with the second and third leader to share their allowance. Either we put all three together in the pot, or we just continue the way it was all the years and we stop playing games. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, everyone else is in support apart from Councillor Stamberger and Councillor Odds. Is that right?
Yes. Didn't you say that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm moving on now. Agenda item 12, appointment to committees and commissions. As with previous report, if anyone does not want to agree the recommendations, you will be asked to turn your camera on once I have gone through the recommendations. Can I ask the Chief Executive, Tim Sheets, to introduce the report?
Mr. Speaker, as laid out.
Thank you. Can member agree? The appointment of Councillor Gregory and I to the Health in Acne Scrutiny Commission, the appointment of Councillor Lynch to the Audit Committee, as detailed in the report.
Agreed.
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 Agreed. Thank you.
Agreed.
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 Thank you. Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you. So, thank you. We will now move to agenda item 13. As with the previous report, anyone who does not wish to agree the report will be asked to turn their cameras on after any debate. Can I ask the Chief Executive, Tim Sheets, to introduce the report?
Mr. Speaker, as laid out.
Thank you. Would members like to debate the report?
Yes.
Councillor Stamberger, you got.
Well, in principle, I've got no problem with what it says here. It seems, I wonder where we're taking our laws from in this council. Because what would have happened today if, God forbid, there would have been a councillor here who was in hospital because they had the coronavirus, or if there's anything else? We're in different circumstances, and I don't know where this 6-month rule plays into this at all. You know, this is completely different thing, and I would like to know where we've taken this law from, and if again Hackney's made their own law like they've done it with other things. I'm totally amused by this, because I completely support Councillor Joseph not being able to do her work. Unfortunately, there are other councillors who couldn't do their work because of the corona, and I don't know where Hackney keeps on doing these funny little things. I would be very interested to know whose guidance this is.
Thank you. Chief Executive Tim Shields, do you want to come back on this?
It's probably the monitoring officer, Mr. Speaker, but the requirement to do this is contained in Section 85 of the Local Government Act 1972. And it's a requirement for this to happen so that Councillor Joseph is not barred from becoming a councillor. Any group can come forward and make representations should they wish this dispensation to be afforded to one of the councillors, and of course ill health would also be one of those circumstances under which this could be granted. So this is can be afforded to any councillor at a reasonable request from their group.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I didn't answer my question. My question was, is this a Hackney doing or this is a borough-wide doing? I haven't had my answer to my question. I've got no problem with Councillor
Stamberger.
Councillor, but I haven't answered my question.
Councillor Stamberger, you've made your point, and the Chief Executive has responded to that. I would like to move on now. Thank you.
I'm sorry, members, I haven't had the answer to my question.
Can members agree the recommendations as set out in the report? Yeah. Councillor.
Agreed.
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 Sorry, members. 1 minute.
Agreed.
1 minute. Excuse me. 1 minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. Councillor Odds.
Yeah, I have
no. To make your point.
Yeah, I have no objection to this provision. However, I'm just wondering why a councillor who is on maternity leave needs to apply for a dispensation. There seems to be an anomaly somewhere. I know the Section 85 says that if you're absent for more than 6 months, you need a dispensation, but surely the law of the land, in terms of allowance of maternity leave, should override that.
Thank you. Chief Executive, can you have a minute to respond quickly?
Mr. Speaker, it is up to that person as to how long they wish to take maternity leave for. Councillor Joseph has chosen to take this period. They could take a matter of days should they choose to. So this dispensation is required because Councillor Joseph has expressed a wish to take maternity leave for that period. But as people are aware, maternity leave can be extremely short should that be chosen.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Can members agree the recommendations as set out in the report? Thank you.
Agreed. Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Right. Thank you. Now, I would like to move to agenda item 14. Motions, Hackney Black Lives Matters. Moved, proposed by Councillor Shadi Eti, seconded by Councillor Susanna Fajana Thomas. Councillor Eti, please propose your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Distinguished colleagues, this is a motion that will tackle high rate of exclusion amongst Black people, police brutality against children and adults. To give an example, in the last 3 years during arrest,
you're only proposing at the moment, then you can explain later. So you need to propose your motion and then you explain later.
I propose the motion, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, thank you.
The Black Lives Matter.
All right. Councillor Fajana Thomas, please second the motion. Please indicate whether you wish to speak immediately after Councillor Eti has moved and explained the purpose of the motion, or whether you wish to reserve your speech until a later period in the debate. Councillor Fajana Thomas.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I second the motion and I reserve mine. I reserve my speech until after other contributors have made their contributions to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Etty, please move and explain the purpose of your motion. You got 5 minutes to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Councillor Odd's hand is up. Can I go ahead, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, you can go ahead. I'll take Councillor Odd after your explanation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, this is a motion that will tackle undue high rates of exclusion amongst Black people, police brutality against children and adults. To give an example, in the last 3 years, during arrest, more children have been handcuffed by police at an increased rate of 158%. I am very proud of what Hackney Council has done, and I'm proud as a councillor as well. We currently have inclusive leadership training. We've done great work with Hackney Young Futures Commission, Young Black Men's Program, ACANT, and everybody is aware that we celebrate our diversity, but we still need to do more. This is a moment in history to stand together to eliminate discrimination of all kinds. The truth is this: we will not grow and prosper as we ought to as a society if we don't take urgent steps to curb racial discrimination and promote policies that enable economic, social, mental, academic, equitable growth for Black and other people of color. As a nation, we cannot reach our best and full potential if everyone in our nation is not prospering. If Black people and other people of color are not given the room and chance to shine as brightly as they can. We usually jump on stories of Black excellence as if they are outlier stories, but in truth, they are not. They are incredible because we understand the hurdles that had to be surpassed to become a success, and that in itself inside. Mr. Speaker, we are brilliant stars daily in everything we do. However, if we spend most of our lives battling unnecessary obstacles, this are enabled by the government and the society. We spend more time striving than surviving than thriving. I personally am tired of merely surviving. We are tired of clutching onto every story of Black success we come across, because despite everything, there still seem so few. And I always wonder how our children will fare. I have done, and I'm doing the best I can for my children. But if we don't fight for a better society, they will never get to live a life of complete contentment and fulfillment that their counterparts enjoy. And that would be to the UK's eternal shame. I urge colleagues to support the motion. I know a lot of my colleagues are going to have 1 or 2 minutes, so that's why I've made this a general one. Please support the motion so that we can truly start to change our community. I love Hackney, and I'm very proud of the Hackney that we have. I want every child to be proud of the Hackney in which they live in, to walk directly on the streets of Hackney with confidence, with boldness, and say this is Hackney. Every young person, every adult, everyone in our community to stand up together. This is a collective responsibility for all of us, and I urge all colleagues to support the motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Councillor Etty. Do members wish to debate the motion?
Yes.
Yes. Mr.
Okay.
Speaker.
All right. So, Councillor Odd, yes, I've got Councillor Odd. Councillor Odd, please, 1 minute. I'm going to call you now.
Forward.
Okay, Councillor Odd, come on now. You have the floor.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I put an amendment forward. What happened to it?
It's coming now. So you can propose your amendment now. So that's I want to call you, because we're having a debate now, so you can propose your amendment. So you cannot propose your amendment until the motion is come up for debate. So it's coming up for debate now, so you can propose your amendment. Is that clear?
Okay.
All right, so go ahead and propose your amendment.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would firstly like to thank Councillor Etty and Councillor Fajana Thomas for bringing this motion to Council. I applaud its sentiments and I would very much like to vote in favour of it. However, as it stands, I cannot. In the same way that I will never buy anything from a co-op store, much as I admire the motives of the founders of the co-op movement, I will not under any circumstances patronise an organisation that openly supports the anti-Semitic BDS movement. In the same way that the swastika will forever be associated with Adolf Hitler, may his name and memory be erased, and the German National Socialist movement, murderers of millions of people, Jews, gypsies, gays, BAME people, the physically and mentally ill, anyone who did not fit their concept of perfection, rather than being associated with the good luck symbol of Hindus, Buddhists and Jains, so too the phrase Black Lives Matter will always be associated with an organisation that has refused to remove from its platform the vicious bigoted slur against Israel, which the document's foreign policy section accused of perpetrating genocide against Palestinians. The platform also labelled Israel an apartheid state and joined with the similarly anti-Semitic BDS movement in calling for the total academic, cultural and economic boycott of the country, a demand made for no other state. And I remind you that this council unanimously accepted the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance guidelines on anti-Semitism. I can think of no better way to express my anger at this than to quote from an article by Melanie Phillips in last week's Jewish Chronicle. She said, Israel should be criticized like any other country, but no other country, people or cause is subjected to the same obsessional campaign of double standards, systemic falsehoods, blood libels, imputations of cosmic malice, and airbrushing from their own history. Boilerplate accusations against Israel of illegality or systematic ill treatment of the Palestinian Arabs are lies. I've deliberately not used the phrase all lives matter because this in itself, however well-meaning it is, has come to have pejorative connotations. Throughout history, we find commonality between the treatments of Jews and that of BAME people. I could list many atrocities perpetrated against Jews in this country and elsewhere just because they're Jewish, and against BAME people just because they have darker coloured skin than many in Western Europe and the Northern Americas. But I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, that apart from the fact that none of us wishes to sit here for several days listening to it, we are all only too well aware of them. But nevertheless, we must never forget and continuously strive with our actions to make this world a better place. I just want to conclude with a story from the Talmud, the Jewish oral law. In the 1st century BCE, the great Jewish sage Hillel was approached by a non-Jew who said to him, I want to convert to Judaism on condition that you explain to me the whole Torah whilst I'm standing on one foot. Now, you can imagine the typical reaction to this would be, go away, you silly man, and don't drive me sugar with your stupidity. But no, not Hillel. This gentle sage accepted the challenge and said, what is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbour. That is the whole Torah. The rest is explanation of this. Go and study it. So I beg you to accept this amendment so that I and others in this room can join with the proposers of this motion to condemn hatred and violence in all its forms and take positive action towards our goal of equality and tolerance for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oates. I've got a question for you. What are the changes that you are proposing to this motion?
I submitted them by email to the monitoring officer and to Ms. Merritt.
So can you read the amended motion out, please?
The amended motion. Hold on one second.
Yes.
I'll find it, and I will.
Mr. Speaker, while we're doing that, can I propose that we extend the length of this meeting by a further 15 minutes?
Seconded.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Okay. Noted.
Agreed.
Noted.
Agreed.
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 Noted.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Right, Councillor Odds, are you ready to read the amended motion out?
Sorry. Where are we? Amendment to motion. There we are. Right. So the amended motion would read, if I can find it. Right. The motion would be entitled Hackney's Lives Matter. And it would carry on, Hackney recognises the systemic racism and inequalities that still exist in the UK today, and that the murder of George Floyd on 25th of May in Minneapolis at the hands of the police resonated with black communities in Hackney. Hackney Council also recognises that the murders of Jews and a New Jersey policeman in Jersey City on December the 10th, 2019, and the murder of Rabbi Joseph Neumann at a synagogue in Monsey, New York on December the 28th, 2019, amongst many recent attacks, had severe repercussions for the feelings of safety and well-being of many of the Jewish community in Hackney as well as elsewhere. Hackney Council stands in solidarity with black communities in Hackney, the UK and across the world who face systemic racism every day. Hackney Council states unequivocally that lives matter. Hackney Council notes that black people are almost 10 times more likely to be stopped and searched, according to the government's own statistics, and 40 times more likely under Section 6 powers. At the same time, the use of handcuffs by the police has increased across the Met and by 158% in Hackney over the last 3 years. According to a 2018 study by the Equality and Human Rights Commission, 5.7% of ethnic minorities in the UK were living in poverty. Black Caribbean and mixed white/Black Caribbean children have rates of permanent exclusion about 3 times that of the pupil population as a whole. That a recent Public Health England report found that the Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. People from Black, Bangladeshi, Pakistani and Indian backgrounds were all up to 1.9 times, twice as likely as to die from coronavirus compared to white people. Hackney Council also notes that a recent Office of National Statistics report found that the Jewish community in England and Wales has been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. Jewish males had a mortality rate involving COVID-19 2.03 times higher compared to Christian males. And Jewish females had a mortality rate involving COVID-19 1.72 times higher compared to Christian females. Hackney Council acknowledges that while it has a good track record of fighting for equality, it can always do more. The track record includes the recently created inclusive leadership training to improve diversity in the workplace, especially at senior levels of the organisation, tackle unconscious bias, and to report the Council's ethnicity pay gap. Launching the review of public spaces that glorify historic figures that were pinnacle to the transatlantic trade state and plantation owners. Continuing the Young Black Men Programme, a groundbreaking 10-year-long initiative aiming to tackle inequalities for young black men in the borough. Supporting the work of Hackney's Youth Independent Advisory Group account in holding the local police to account. Annual programmes of events for Black History Month, including last year's record-breaking attendance for the Hackney Museum's exhibition. Champion and campaign against the injustices faced by the Windrush generation. Achieving an excellent rating through the Local Government Equality Framework Peer Challenge. Hackney Council believes the early progress made by the police on implementing the Macpherson recommendations 20 years ago have been seriously marred, and measures to transform the attitude of the police towards race relations and improve accountability have not gone far enough. Hackney Council commits to being an anti-racist organisation, one that does not just tackle inequality, but actively fights racism in the borough. Hackney Council resolves to publish its anti-racism programme of work from a cross-council service in one publicly available report, and ask its partners and anchor institutions to pledge their commitment to anti-racism in the borough. Further strengthen the partnership between the council and youth representatives to hold the local police to account, such as the Youth IAG work with them to take forward the recommendations of the Hackney Youth Futures Commission and campaign for policing by consent. Better reflect Hackney's diversity and anti-racist history in the borough's public realm. improve the diversity of the senior leadership of the council, building on the inclusive leadership training, and maintain the excellent rating in future local government equality framework peer challenges, and work with partners to improve diversity across the public sector. Lobby for an independent inquiry into the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and whether their actions helped or hindered the protection of Hackney's black communities. Engage with any future government commission on racism in the UK, but also resolve to lobby the government to implement outstanding recommendations in the Lamy Review 2017, the Dame Angiolini Report 2017, the Windrush Lessons Learned Review 2018, the McGregor-Smith Review 2017, and the Macpherson Report 1999. Acknowledge the UN Resolution 68237, International Decade for People of African Descent. Implement initiatives and activities to raise awareness, educate on the history of people of African descent, and promote their contributions to contemporary societies. In all instances, support the police in their justified and lawful prevention and solving of crime, and encourage their efforts to eliminate all forms of racism in their ranks and promote community cohesion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Olds. Any seconder?
Councillor Steinberger.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Steinberger. Would members like to debate the amendment to the motion?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
So you can speak. You're going to have a right to reply. So let members debate that.
Okay. Yes.
You have the
yes.
right to reply.
Okay. Yes, please.
To the amendment. So any member that wants to contribute to this one, we've got 5 minutes to do so. So please put up your hands if you want to contribute to the debate for this amendment motion. Yes, Councillor David.
Yes. Can everyone hear me?
Anytime, please.
Yes. Thanks.
Yes, we can hear you.
Do I have? How many minutes do I have? Anyway, I'll get on with it. Sorry, I think this amendment is a wrecking amendment because no one is saying that all lives don't matter. The issue here is that we are dealing with a specific problem. Now, we don't have a definition for Afrophobia, which is racism directed at Black people. We don't have that, but we have an IHRA definition. So I think the only thing we're having now, we're asking for this motion. I think it shouldn't be too much for everyone to put their weight behind it. The International Decade for People of African Descent, which was recognized by the UN, I don't think many organizations have actually recognized it or done anything substantial about it. I think it's a real important thing that Hackney Council is taking a lead, and I think we should actually support that. And I think that amendment is actually throws dirt in the face of Black Lives Matter.
All right, thank you, Councillor David. Anyone else? Councillor Williams. Councillor Williams. Councillor Williams, you've got a minute.
Yeah, I just want to speak against the motion, Mr. Speaker. Sorry, against the amendment, not the motion itself. I think the council's done a huge amount already to recognise anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. And we passed motions unanimously in the council. I think that we have stood up for the Jewish community, both here and overseas, standing side by side in multi-faith communities. And I think that it's fundamentally wrong for the opposition to go against the spirit of this motion and erase Black people from this motion. And I call on all members to vote against the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Steinberger.
Yeah, I wasn't going to speak much.
You've only got a minute. You've only got a minute.
In principle, we all agree that Black Lives Matters. Now, I don't see anything wrong when we add in about other communities. I don't see why we can't all be voting together. I very much would want to support this motion with Councillor Odd's amendments. I'm not going to go into too much details because this is a very important thing. And again, I want to thank the 2 councillors who actually brought it to Councillor Etty, who's always busy doing good things, and also Councillor Thompson. And I would really urge you to support it so we could all support this together. I hear what you say, but I don't see there's anything wrong in making it a little bit bigger. And in principle, it says the whole time about the black community, and
thank you.
The motion principle.
Thank you. Councillor Eti, can you reply back to the amendment, please?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
You got 2 minutes to do so, so we're going to go to put it into a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Councillor Odds, for the amendment, and for my colleagues. I totally disagree with the amendment. While it is acknowledged and agreed that all lives are valuable, we are focusing on Black and other people of color at the moment. This is a specific motion. I'm saying Black Lives Matter because Black people have bared a heavy burden and the most brunt of racial injustice in our society. That is the reason for today's gathering. Words are important, and it is important that we acknowledge the fact that Black lives do matter and use words as appropriately as they ought to. I totally disagree with the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Now we're going to put it into a vote now. We are going to a roll call. So Tess is going to call your name alphabetically and then just say you for the amendment or against it. Thank you.
So this is just for the amendment?
This is just for the amendment. If you're for it, she'll call your name and say for, and if you're against, you say against. Thank you.
Councillor Adams.
Against.
Councillor Adijah.
Sorry. While understanding the sentiment, I'm against.
The speaker's room is muted, by the way.
Sorry, go on.
Councillor Bell. Councillor Billington.
Against.
Councillor Bramble.
Against.
Councillor Burke. Councillor Burke.
Against.
Councillor Cameron. Councillor Cameron. Councillor Chapman.
Against.
Councillor Chohan. Councillor Chohan. Councillor Coburn.
Against.
Councillor Conway.
Against.
Councillor David.
Against.
Councillor Desmond.
Against.
Councillor Etty.
Against.
Councillor Fajana Thomas.
Against.
Councillor Garcia.
Against.
Councillor Mayor Glanville.
Against.
Councillor Gordon.
Against.
Councillor Gregory.
Against.
Councillor Hanson.
Against.
Councillor Hayhurst.
Against.
Councillor Kennedy.
Against.
Councillor Lufkin. Councillor Lufkin.
Against.
Councillor Lynch.
Against.
Councillor Maxwell.
Against.
Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor McMahon. Okay. Councillor McMahon. Councillor McMahon. Councillor Moema.
Against.
Councillor Nicholson.
Against.
Councillor Odds.
For.
Councillor August Canley.
Against.
Councillor Rosen. Councillor Rosen. Councillor Papier. He's not here, is he? Councillor Patrick.
Against.
Councillor Peters.
Against.
Councillor Bluvier.
Against.
Councillor Potter.
Against.
Councillor Race.
Against.
Councillor Rathbone.
Against.
Councillor Renison.
Against.
Councillor Rickard.
Against.
Councillor Selman.
Against.
Councillor Sharman.
Against.
Councillor Smith.
Against.
Councillor Snell.
Against.
Councillor Spence.
Against.
Councillor Steinberger.
For.
Councillor Stopps.
Against.
Councillor Webb.
Against.
Opposition.
Councillor Williams.
Against.
Councillor Woodley.
They're all for.
Against.
Councillor Root.
Doubt of about
Yeah.
3L.
Against.
Thank you.
Not carried.
I can declare that the amendment motion is not carried. So we are moving back to the substantive motion, the original one.
Mr. Speaker, could I move to extend the length of the meeting until 10:30, fully realising that we can't extend even further than that, so everyone contributing to the debate will need to make sure that they are aware of that.
Okay.
Agreed.
Thank you, Chief Whip. Right.
Agreed.
So we are moving to
Agreed.
the agreed. So we are moving back to the substantive motion. So we're going to debate that, and I've got some members that wish to contribute to the debate. I've got Councillor Conway, Councillor Adejare, Councillor Bramble, Councillor David, Councillor Cobham, Councillor Porter, Councillor Patrick, and Councillor Root. So we've all got 1 minute to contribute. So yes, I can see Councillor Ott putting up his hand. So Councillor Conway, you've got 1 minute to contribute to the debate. Can you go on, please? You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud of Hackney's long-standing anti-racist reputation and of our efforts as an administration to address racial inequality in Hackney. But in Hackney, there are sadly many examples that I can point to, daily reminders that Black lives still do not matter nearly as much as they ought to. The COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare the devastating consequences of racial disparities here in the UK, but it's not just COVID-19. Black women are more likely to die in pregnancy and childbirth. Our children are more likely to be removed from our care by the local authority. Our physical and mental health outcomes are among some of the poorest, and the snowy white peaks that are spoken of in relation to the NHS are sadly reflected in the makeup of our council's staffing body. As the chair of the Children and Young People Scrutiny Commission, discussing these very issues of racial inequalities with a panel of senior officers that is invariably exclusively white serves as just one of my frequent reminders of just how far we still have to go. And this is why we need to put our full weight behind supporting this motion and committing to ensuring its sentiments permeate everything that we do.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Conway. Councillor Adejare, you've got a minute.
Thank you. 4 years ago, I stood in the chamber and spoke against hate crime, and over the past 18 months, we've passed motions supporting the formal definition of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and calls to tackle anti-Semitic attacks. While I welcome and endorse this motion, increasing prevalence of racism against Black communities in our own country and the much-mentioned death of Rashan Charles in our own borough, it's saddening that it took the murder of George Floyd some thousands of miles away for this matter to be brought to the fore in our own country. What I can unreservedly say is that every Black family, including my own, at some time has been subject to the increasingly refined nuances of racism, whether it be in our workplaces, the schools we attend, or our interaction with state agencies such as the police. So much so that many feel the Black body, as during the transatlantic slave trade and the era of the empire, is viewed as a disposable commodity. The Scarman Report of 1981 called out institutional racism, as did the McPherson Report some 20 years later. Yet the subsequent rhetoric amounted to naught in respect of the experiences of Black people, and this needs to change. This motion rightly calls for recent findings, such as those evidenced in the Lammy Review, to be recognised and acted upon. While those of us who grew up in the borough are grateful for the fact we did so in an environment where every nation, religion, and way of life is represented, there remains a need in the fact that by virtue of being born Black, the odds are already stacked against us. Like every one of us who's experienced racism and oppression, it's my hope that in taking this motion forward, my daughter and those of her generation in their adulthood will not have to fight the fight of our grandparents.
Thank you, Councillor Adejare.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Bramble, 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You often hear all lives matter, but if all life matters, why have Black people seen such terrible injustice years after years after year? Mr. Speaker, these terrible things were always happening to Black people. The difference is the world's watching and we cannot unsee these atrocities. And I believe that we are the generation, and I hope and pray that we are the generation that changes it for the generation to come, so that we mark in history that the young ones coming up behind us don't have to live in this atrocity, that they will look and say, because of people in 2020, that their lives are different. Mr. Speaker, as you can see, I have dark skin. I believe I have beautiful dark skin, but unless you are Black, you will never understand how invisible you can be in a room, invisible of places of influence and power because of the colour of your skin. This needs to stop, Mr. Speaker, and I support the motion.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bramble. We'll call on Councillor Odds, if he's still logging on. Councillor Odds? Councillor Odds?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You've only got a minute, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just like to say that Councillor David and the others who spoke about the amendment totally misunderstood what I said. I fully support the vast majority of what has been said this evening, but I will not be able to vote in favour of a motion that uses the phrase Black Lives Matter, because that phrase has been taken by a racist organisation and now represents racism. I agree with the fact that black lives are as important as anybody else, but I will not be able to support anything that uses that phrase, which is being appropriated by an anti-Semitic organisation.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Odds. Councillor David? Councillor David, you got a minute.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think this is a very balanced motion. It recognizes the progress which has been made, and most importantly, it hits the nail on the head on the horrors of endemic racism which we face in society. As one of the only 3 Black men who are councillors in Hackney, I have to say thank you to our allies and in the struggle who have helped us to get how far we have got. It sometimes feels as a Black man as if one is guilty until proven innocent, as opposed to the other way around. Even at doing that, one gets condemned for something which someone who's not Black would find themselves in the same shoes. I hope we can play our bit from this motion and then to all come together and work for progress. There are lots of things we can do together. I hope that Councillor Odsi would have a rethink that we can work together on this.
Thank you, Councillor David. Councillor Cobham?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, since the brutal killing of George Floyd, many have been quick to dismiss the Black Lives Matter movement as an America issue. What they fail to realise is the level of racism that Black people continue to face on a day-to-day basis. Mr. Speaker, since the beginning of lockdown, 22,000 young Black men have been stopped and searched in London between March and May. That's 30% of all young Black men living in London. What was more disturbing was that 80% of those searches led to no further action being taken. Mr. Speaker, they violate the integrity that many of our diverse young people living in Hackney. Earlier on, you heard the mayor highlighting how BME communities have been hugely affected by COVID-19. And it should be noted that Black people are 4 times more likely to die as a result of COVID-19. Not because the virus discriminates, but the systems that we live in by default do. Mr. Speaker, racism is an existential threat to our society, and it's high time we woke up to that. MLK understood this. He described racism as that hound of hell which dogs the tracks of our civilization. Because if we don't kill racism dead, it would tear us apart. That's why I'm fully supportive of this motion, and thank you so much to our colleagues for bringing this to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Cobham. Colleagues, I'm sorry, I might not be able to take everybody, but I'll try and accommodate as many people as possible. So I'm going to call on Councillor Porter to make our own contribution. Councillor Porter, you have a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to join my colleagues in showing solidarity and fully supporting the motion in its entirety. As a white Hackney councillor, the importance of gaining a fuller understanding of the impacts of systematic racism cannot be understated, as well as calling out and challenging racism when it occurs. I'd like to pay tribute to the many organisations here in Hackney who have been working in this field to transform lives, and in so doing, addressing the impacts of systemic racism for residents in our Hackney community. As the speaker, previous to yourself, Mr. Speaker, I was fortunate to work with Father to Father, whose mission is to increase the proportion of children growing up with involved, responsible fathers, and also male role models, much of their work making a significant difference within the Black community. I fully endorse this motion, which, if passed tonight, will strengthen the work carried out by.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. So don't forget that we are very tight with time. We're finishing past. So, like I said, I might not be able to take everybody. Councillor Fajana, do you like to come in now? Councillor Fajana Thomas, would you like to come in now?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Can I just say thank you?
Yeah,
Can
briefly, please.
Can I just say I'm the seconder of this motion, Mr. Speaker. A huge thanks to all the previous speakers and to everyone that has taken part in Black Lives Matter protests and various events in the last 2 months. The BLM protest that started in Minneapolis has revealed some of the bitter truth in our history here in the UK and forced people around the world to look deeper into issues of discrimination and racism. Therefore, we are putting this motion forward this evening, colleagues. This motion is asking us, people that have joined protest, that have taken the knee, to take this forward. Taking it forward as a council, as individuals, beyond the knee, so that it becomes policies that will bring about meaningful change to our borough. Black Lives Matter movement, at the end of the day, is about human rights. It's about respect, protection, and fulfillment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms, and recognized in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which our borough we subscribe to. It's about us as people of African descent being able to live a life of joy without having to worry about what is going to happen to me at work because I'm a Black woman. Worry about my loud voice not to be taken for aggression. Worry about our children underachieving in schools because of racial discrimination. Worry about our young men walking into the shop for fear of being mistaken for a shoplifter or are there to pickpocket. Worry that my son wear a hoodie is not seen as a drug dealer or called the coolest monkey in the jungle.
Thank you, Councillor.
Is worrying as a mother
Thomas. Thank you.
that my son is going to buy a car. I'm not worried because he wanted to buy tinted windows car so that the police will not be stopping him every second. He's worried that our children will have the same opportunity like other children. Colleagues, I hope you can all support this motion tonight. It's not about it's about Black Lives Matter, and it's about Hackney setting the pace for Black people. And finally, to Councillor Ozi, I'm not too sure what you meant by Black Lives Matter that is being hijacked.
Can we take this one off the line, please? We haven't got time. We ran out of time. We've got other contributors. Thank you. Councillor Patrick. Councillor Patrick.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You've only got a minute, please.
Pleased to speak in favour. Yeah, okay. I'm very pleased to speak in favour of this motion. Black lives do matter. After 400 years of racism, numerous reports on racism, such as the 2007 Select Committee, which said that black and ethnic minority people were was over-justified in the criminal justice system, and the Macpherson report, we're still talking about racism in such places as the police. As chair living in Hackney, I felt obliged to speak tonight because the meeting of 23rd of June, we heard about the trust and confidence in the local police, which has dropped. Many of the reasons it has dropped is due to the disproportionate amount of stop and search and handcuffing by the police of black and Asian young men disproportionately, despite them being disproportionately overrepresented in the criminal justice
Thank you,
system.
Councillor Patrick. Thank you. Thank you now, Councillor Patrick. Can I call Councillor Root, please? Can you make your contribution 1 minute?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm speaking as a backbench councillor, but also in my capacity as Secretary of the Constituency Labour Party in Hackney South. And I'd like to say that our Executive Committee welcomes this motion unequivocally. As a local party, we recognise our responsibility to champion the rights of black people and to examine and challenge white privilege where we see it, both inside our party and far beyond. Locally, we want to let our black residents and members see that the Labour Party is not slow to respond positively to Black Lives Matter. We need to challenge the white establishment to recognise and acknowledge how history has impacted black people disproportionately and to work together to right wrongs and injustice. The COVID restrictions mean that full Labour Party meetings have not been happening, making it hard to express our solidarity with BLM formally. I've spoken with the Secretary of the Hackney North Constituency Labour Party, and she tells me that their banner has been taken on BLM protests.
Thank you, Councillor Root. Thank you for your contribution. I'm going to take 3 more, which is the Mayor, Councillor Etty, and Councillor Williams, and then we're going to call the roll call. Sorry, Councillor Reyes and Councillor Garcia, we are unable to take your call. Mayor Glanville, can you make your contribution 1 minute, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I just pay massive tribute to the 2 speeches from Councillor Ette and Councillor Fajana Thomas. I think they've powerfully illustrated why allowing communities to define the racism and prejudice that they experience is so very, very important. And that is what we're doing collectively as allies or black leaders or other diverse community leaders this evening. I didn't speak on the amendment, but deleting the word black from a Black Lives Matters amendment does not allow a community to do that defining. And every time we call out other forms of hatred, and we have discussed them in this chamber virtually now, we've allowed communities to define the prejudice and hate that they experience, whether that is institutional, whether that is criminal, or whether that is casual racism or unconscious bias or bias. I think is incredibly important we acknowledge that this evening. The issues are in the detail of this amendment, and what I would pay tribute to is this isn't just about passing a motion that sets out our values, it is about delivering concerted action once we pass this motion.
Thank you.
And that's why I'm speaking for. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Councillor Williams, you've got 2 minutes, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
1 minute, sorry, 1 minute for you.
Oh, you've cut me down by a minute. Thanks. This council has a long history of standing against all forms of hate, and it's right that we do so again tonight. The title of this motion is a statement that my life matters, and the life of councillors and residents, black councillors and black residents also matter. It acknowledges that racism has long existed, and the Tory amendment to raise the voices of black people goes against the very spirit of the motion. Black bodies have been subjected to dehumanising and degrading treatment. Tropes have been used to paint black men as violent criminals who can only be subdued by disproportionate force, and black women as scary. These are racist tropes that have a long history on both sides of the Atlantic, and we hear them used in modern day Britain, even as recently as a few weeks ago in a public meeting in this borough. The history of enslavement has been misreported, misrepresented, and largely left untold, undertold through our education system. Cries for restitution.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Thank you for your contribution.
Long ignored. And Black Lives Matter, and the trauma that we experience has been relived over and over again.
Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. Councillor Etty, you've got 2 minutes to reply. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, thank you everyone for your contribution. I'm extremely proud that you are my colleagues. We have always stand together. This is us. We stood together to pass the motion on anti-Semitism and also definition of Islamophobia. And as Hackney councillors and also as a community, the fact that I chair the Faith Forum, we have always come together. When there are problems, we have come together as one community in Hackney. We have always support ourselves. We always have, irrespective of anything, our diversity has always made us to be much more stronger. And I'm really proud that I have great colleagues. And this night as well, I hope we will go in the same direction. To vote in favor of this motion we're making history for ourselves, not only for ourselves, but for our children and children unborn, for generations to come. That we're not just talking, but we are actually taking a great action, taking a bold step to make positive changes for the life of our young people, for the life of every child, for the life of Black people and people of color in Hackney, and for the life of our community. I hope and I strongly believe, and I trust you all colleagues, as always, that you support the motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Eti. Councillor Reyes and Councillor Garcia, sorry, I'm unable to call you to participate. My apologies. So now we are moving to roll call vote. So listen to text and say if you're for or against. Thank you.
Councillor Adams.
For.
Adajari.
For.
Bell.
For.
Billington.
For.
Bramble.
For.
Burke.
For.
Cameron. Chapman. Chohan.
For.
Coban.
For.
Conway. Conway. For. Desmond.
For.
Etty.
For.
Ajana Thomas.
For.
Garcia.
For.
Councillor David.
For.
Meg Lamble.
For.
Councillor Gordon.
For.
Councillor Gregory. Councillor Gregory. Councillor Hanson.
For.
Councillor Hayhurst.
For.
Councillor Kennedy.
For.
Councillor Lufkin.
For.
Councillor Lynch.
For.
Councillor Maxwell.
For.
Councillor Mackenzie.
For.
McMahon.
For.
Moema.
For.
Nicholson.
For.
Odds.
Abstain.
August Canley.
For.
Ozen.
For.
Papier. Yeah. Patrick.
For.
Peters.
For.
Pluvier.
For.
Potter.
For.
Grace.
For.
Rathbone.
For.
Renison.
For.
Rickard.
For.
Bellman.
For.
Jarman.
For.
Smith.
Absolutely for.
Snell.
For.
Bent. Steinberger. Stops.
For.
Webb.
For.
Williams.
For.
Woodley.
For.
Root.
For.
Carried.
So I can declare the motion carried. Thank you, everyone. Motion carried. That concludes.
Something about it.
Yeah, that concludes the formal business of this evening. And can I thank everyone for attending and for their contribution. Unfortunately, I cannot offer you a drink, so you can have a virtual drink. You can have a virtual drink. And thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for a very
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Right on time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.